Park rangers face something in the darkness every single night. They walk the deep forests, the isolated trails, the national parks, and out there, between the trees, they find things that should not exist. Wendigos, skinwalkers, entities that hunt, creatures that feed. Park rangers have faced them. They survived. They have stories. The government buries these stories. Nobody believes them. But you will. You are watching Mr. Belcho right now, at this very moment, in your city, in your country. What time is it where you are? What location? Tell us. The darkness does not care where you live. Subscribe now. Hit like. Comment your city. Comment your time zone. Tell us where you are when these stories find you. Let us begin. The wind whispered through the pines as I stood at the edge of Lake Kobuk, watching the sunset paint ripples of gold across its surface. My first month at the Denali Wilderness Station had been quieter than expected. The isolation that frightened most potential rangers was precisely what drew me here, to this remote outpost where Alaska's beauty remained untamed and dangerous. I'm Casquet. That's what my Inuit grandmother called me, meaning one who walks between worlds. My birth certificate says Kevin Mills, but that name belonged to the city version of me, the one who abandoned a promising career in environmental science to become a park ranger in one of America's most isolated territories. The wooden cabin that served as both my home and ranger station creaked in the cold evening air. Built in the 1940s by the first generation of rangers who patrolled these woods, it stood as a testament to human resilience against nature's indifference. Inside was sparse but functional, a desk covered with maps and incident reports, a radio system for emergencies, a wood stove that struggled against the persistent chill, and a wall of weather-worn books left by previous occupants. "Dispatch to Ranger Station 17, come in." The radio crackled, breaking my trance. I moved inside, closing the door against the growing darkness. Station equipment, experience level. Male, 32, named Robert Walsh. Experienced backcountry hiker, well-equipped. This wasn't his first time on the trail. That detail unsettled me more than if he'd been a novice. Experienced hikers rarely went missing without cause. I'll begin search operations at first light. Weather forecast? Clear morning, potential storm moving in by afternoon. Keep your radio close. Copy. Station 17 out. I pulled the topographical maps from my desk drawer, spreading them across the wooden surface. Black Ridge was approximately 4 hours northeast on foot. The trail intersected with 3 others, creating countless possibilities for where Walsh might have strayed. As I prepared my gear for the morning search, I couldn't shake a growing unease. 3 months ago, before I arrived, another experienced hiker had gone missing in the same area. The ranger logs noted a search spanning 2 weeks before being called off. No trace was ever found. The logs contained something else too. Notes from my predecessor, Ranger Howard, describing unusual findings during his search. Massive impressions in the soft earth that resembled footprints but measured nearly 16 inches in length, broken branches at heights unreachable by most wildlife, and once a sound that Howard described as neither animal nor human, but something between a wail and a deep rattling breath. Howard had requested transfer shortly afterward. His final log entry simply read, "The locals were right about Black Ridge. There are things in these woods older than our understanding." I had dismissed it as the ramblings of a man too long in isolation. Many rangers developed peculiar beliefs after months alone in the wilderness. I'd sworn not to fall into the same pattern. Sleep came reluctantly that night. The wind picked up, sending branches scraping against the cabin's roof like bony fingers seeking entrance. I dreamed of dark woods and something massive moving through them with impossible silence, watching, waiting. Dawn broke with crisp, clean light that made the previous night's unease seem foolish. I dressed in layers, thermal underwear, flannel, my heavy ranger jacket emblazoned with the Park Service patch, and packed my rucksack with essentials, first aid kit, emergency shelter, 3 days' worth of rations, flares, compass, satellite phone, and my sidearm. Standard issue for search and rescue, though I'd never had cause to use it. The forest welcomed me with morning sounds, birds calling, small creatures rustling in underbrush, the distant flow of water over rocks. I checked my GPS and set out toward Black Ridge. The first miles passed uneventfully. The main trail was well maintained, cutting through valleys of pine and spruce, but as I approached the ridge, the path narrowed and vegetation grew denser. Signs of human passage became scarce. "Robert," I called periodically, my voice swallowed by the trees. "Park Service. Robert Walsh." Only echoes answered, distorting my voice until it sounded foreign even to my own ears. By midday, I reached the point where the main trail branched. According to the map, the left fork continued up the ridge while the right descended toward a series of small alpine lakes. Walsh could have taken either. I was examining the ground for signs of recent passage when I noticed it. An unnatural silence had fallen. No birdsong, no rustle of small animals, just the soft sigh of wind through needles. Wilderness veterans know this silence. It typically means a predator is near, bear, wolf, or mountain lion. But something felt wrong about this silence. It felt expectant. I straightened, hand instinctively moving to my sidearm. The surrounding forest revealed nothing unusual, yet the sensation of being watched intensified. Scanning the tree line, I noticed a dark space between two ancient pines where the light seemed reluctant to penetrate. Then I saw the tracks. Calling them footprints would be misleading. They were impressions, certainly, made by something bipedal, but they measured nearly 18 inches in length and showed a depth that suggested tremendous weight. They didn't match any wildlife indigenous to the region. A chill ran through me despite the afternoon warmth. Howard's logs suddenly seemed less like paranoia and more like warning. The impressions led off the trail toward the thickest part of the forest. Following them would mean abandoning the search for Walsh, at least temporarily. Protocol dictated staying on established routes when looking for missing persons. But something about those tracks pulled at me with almost physical force. I found myself stepping off the trail before I'd consciously decided to do so. The forest grew darker as I followed the strange tracks. The trees here were older, their canopies forming a ceiling that allowed only sporadic beams of sunlight to penetrate. The ground grew soft with decades of fallen needles muffling my footsteps. The tracks led to a small clearing where they abruptly vanished. At the center of the clearing stood a stone formation that appeared deliberately arranged, flat stones stacked into a rough pyramid about 4 feet high. It wasn't a natural formation, nor did it match known structures built by indigenous peoples of the region. As I approached the stone structure, the air grew noticeably colder. A faint odor permeated the clearing, musky, wild, with undertones of decay. I reached out to touch the stones when a sound stopped me cold. A deep, throaty exhalation came from the dense forest beyond the clearing. It wasn't a growl, not exactly, but it held a resonance that made my chest vibrate in response. It was followed by the distinct crack of breaking wood, something large moving through the trees. My training abandoned me. Every instinct screamed danger in a language more primal than thought. I backed away slowly, then turned and walked quickly toward the main trail, fighting the urge to run. Running triggers prey responses in predators. But was I being stalked by a predator, or something else entirely? I made it back to the junction as dark clouds began gathering overhead. The approaching storm would make searching impossible, and with daylight fading, I had no choice but to temporarily abandon the search for Walsh. As I headed back toward my station, the first heavy drops of rain struck through the canopy. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in stark relief. In that brief electric moment, I glimpsed a figure standing between distant trees, massive, upright, and perfectly still. When darkness returned, it was gone. The rain became torrential, soaking through my jacket despite its waterproofing. By the time I reached the cabin, I was shivering uncontrollably. I built a fire in the wood stove with trembling hands, changed into dry clothes, and radioed dispatch to report my findings, omitting the strange tracks and the figure I'd glimpsed in the lightning flash. "Storm's expected to clear by morning," the dispatcher informed me. 3 additional rangers are being deployed to assist in the search. They'll rendezvous at your location at 800 hours. "Copy that," I replied, relief flooding through me. Whatever I'd encountered in those woods, I wouldn't be facing it alone tomorrow. That night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the mountains, I pored over the old ranger logs, searching for any mention of the stone structure I'd found. Nothing specific appeared, but I discovered a pattern in the reports of missing hikers over the past 30 years. Every disappearance had occurred within a 5-mile radius of Black Ridge. Every search had been accompanied by reports of unusual sounds, unexplained tracks, or glimpses of something that shouldn't exist in these woods. The locals had a name for it, according to Howard's notes. They called it Kushtaka, the land otter man in Tlingit mythology. But Howard believed it was something else, something science had dismissed but indigenous peoples across North America had always recognized. As lightning illuminated my cabin, I stared at the word Howard had scrawled across his final log entry, underlined 3 times. Sasquatch morning brought clear skies and 3 additional rangers. Jordan Rivera, a veteran with 15 years in backcountry search and rescue. Miles Akana, a tracker from Hawaii who'd transferred to Alaska seeking real wilderness. And Lena Wintambi, a field biologist turned ranger whose specialty was predator behavior. "You found tracks?" Lena asked as we gathered around my desk where I'd spread the topographical maps. I hesitated, then nodded. "Not animal tracks I could identify. Too large for bear. Moose can leave some pretty big impressions, especially in soft ground," Jordan offered. "These were bipedal," I said, "and in a straight line." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Bear will sometimes walk on hind legs for short distances." "Not like this," I insisted, then regretted it when I saw them exchange glances. "Look," Lena said gently, "isolation plays tricks on the mind. We all know that. Let's focus on finding Walsh." I nodded, swallowing my frustration. I knew what I'd seen, but I also knew how it sounded. The rookie ranger, barely a month in, already seeing monsters in the woods. We split the search area into 4 sections with Black Ridge at the center. Each ranger would take a quadrant, maintaining radio contact hourly. We would meet at the ridge junction at midday to reassess. "One more thing," Jordan said as we prepared to depart. "Weather Service reports unusual thermal patterns moving through this region, potential for sudden fog or storms. If visibility drops, don't push forward. Regroup at the nearest landmark." We set out at different intervals. I took the northeast quadrant, which included the clearing with the stone structure. Part of me hoped to avoid it entirely, but another part needed confirmation that what I'd seen was real. The forest felt different with sunlight streaming through the canopy. Birds called overhead, small animals scurried through underbrush, and the oppressive silence of yesterday was absent. I followed the main trail for 3 miles before branching onto a less defined path that would take me toward the clearing. "Ranger Mills checking in," I spoke into my radio at the appointed hour. "Northeast quadrant, approximately 4 miles from base. No sign of Walsh yet." The others reported similar lack of progress. Lena mentioned finding a campsite that might have been Walsh's, but it was at least 2 days abandoned. As I approached the area where I'd found the strange tracks, I noticed something odd. Despite the heavy rain overnight, the ground showed no animal tracks of any kind, no deer, no rabbits, not even squirrel prints around the bases of trees. It was as if wildlife deliberately avoided this section of forest. I slowed my pace, senses heightened. The trees here seemed to grow closer together than I remembered, creating natural corridors that channeled movement in specific directions. Was it coincidence or deliberate design? The clearing appeared suddenly, as if the forest had parted to reveal it. The stone structure stood as I'd left it, but something had changed. Atop the pyramid of stones now sat a crude figure fashioned from twigs and pine needles, roughly humanoid, but with elongated limbs and an oversized head. I approached cautiously, scanning the tree line for movement. The effigy was freshly made. The broken twigs still showed green at their cores. Someone, or something, had been here since yesterday's storm. The radio at my belt crackled, making me jump. "All units, this is Ranger Wintambi. I found something unusual approximately 2 miles west of the junction. Possible evidence of Walsh." "What kind of evidence?" Jordan's voice responded. A pause. "Better see for yourselves. I'm sending coordinates." My GPS beeped as it received Lena's location. It would take me at least 40 minutes to reach her position, crossing through difficult terrain. I turned to leave the clearing when movement caught my eye, a branch swaying against the wind, about 50 yards into the forest. I froze, watching. Nothing else moved, yet the sensation of being observed intensified. "Is someone there?" I called, immediately regretting breaking the silence. "Robert Walsh, this is Park Service." No response came, but the air seemed to thicken, making breathing difficult. The musky odor I'd noticed yesterday returned, stronger now. I backed away from the stone structure, keeping my eyes on the tree line where I'd noticed the movement. Something dark shifted between trunks, too massive for a man, too deliberate for a bear. My radio crackled again. "Mills, do you copy? What's your ETA?" Jordan's voice sounded tense. I fumbled for the radio, unwilling to look away from the trees. "Copy. On my way. ETA 40 minutes." As I spoke, a low sound emanated from the forest, that same resonant exhalation I'd heard yesterday but closer now, and followed by what could only be described as words, though in no language I recognized. The sounds held rhythm and intention, rising and falling like speech. I ran. Abandoning all protocol about maintaining a controlled pace in the wilderness, I sprinted back toward the trail, branches whipping my face as I crashed through undergrowth. Behind me came the sounds of pursuit, heavy footfalls and the snap of breaking wood. Whatever followed moved faster than anything its size should allow. I reached the main trail and turned toward Lena's coordinates, maintaining my pace despite burning lungs. The sounds of pursuit faded, then ceased altogether once I was back on marked trails. I slowed to catch my breath, looking back over my shoulder. The trail behind me was empty, yet I couldn't shake the certainty that I was still being watched. When I reached Lena's position, the other rangers were already gathered around something on the ground. Jordan looked up as I approached, his expression grim. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "What did you find?" Lena pointed to a backpack propped against a fallen log. "Walsh's gear. ID inside confirms it." The backpack was relatively undamaged but had been completely emptied. A short distance away lay a scattered array of supplies: water filter, camp stove, dehydrated meals, first aid kit, all apparently examined and discarded. "Animal foraging?" Miles suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't believe it. Lena shook her head. "Bears would have destroyed the pack getting to food. This was deliberate." "Could Walsh have abandoned his gear for some reason?" I asked. "No one abandons survival equipment in this wilderness," Jordan said, "not voluntarily." We searched the surrounding area in expanding circles. Apart from the scattered gear, we found no sign of Walsh, no clothing, no blood, no indications of a struggle or accident. "There's something else," Lena said, leading us to a massive spruce about 20 yards from where we'd found the backpack. "Look at this." Embedded in the bark, about 7 feet above the ground, was a clump of dark hair, unlike any animal fur I recognized. Below it, the trunk showed gouges in a pattern that resembled claw marks, but far larger than bear or wolverine could produce. Miles examined the hair without touching it. "Not human, not any wildlife I'm familiar with." Lena carefully collected samples of the hair in evidence bags. "I'd need lab equipment to be certain, but this resembles accounts of hair samples allegedly belonging to—" "Don't say it," Jordan interrupted. "We're scientific professionals. Let's stick to verifiable facts." A tense silence fell over the group. We all knew what Lena had been about to suggest. "We should expand the search," I said finally. "The stone structure I found might be significant." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What stone structure?" I described the clearing and the pyramid of stones, along with the effigy I'd discovered today. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to concern. "Sounds like it could be a marker of some kind," Miles suggested. "Indigenous peoples often use stone formations to mark territories or significant locations." "Or it could be more recent," Lena added. "Perhaps Walsh himself built it." "Either way, it's worth investigating," Jordan decided. "We'll head there together. No one separates from this point forward." As we gathered our gear to move toward the clearing, I wrestled with whether to tell them about the sounds I'd heard, those almost words in an impossible voice, and the massive shape I'd glimpsed moving through the trees. Professional credibility warred with the need to warn them. Before I could decide, a blood-curdling scream tore through the forest, human, male, and terrified beyond reason. It came from the direction of Black Ridge, perhaps a half-mile distant. "Walsh!" Jordan shouted, already running toward the sound. We followed, crashing through underbrush, leaping fallen logs. The scream came again, closer now, followed by the sounds of breaking branches and heavy movement through the forest ahead. We emerged into a small natural meadow just as a figure burst from the tree line opposite. A man, clothing torn, face scratched and bloody, moving with the desperate speed of pure terror. It was Robert Walsh. When he saw us, his expression transformed from fear to wild hope. "Run!" he screamed, still charging toward us. "It's right behind me!" We instinctively raised our rifles, aiming at the tree line where Walsh had emerged. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the trees at the meadow's edge began to sway, though no wind blew. What stepped into the clearing defied everything my rational mind told me was possible. Standing at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in dark brown hair, it moved with an unsettling combination of animal power and human deliberation. Its face, its face, appeared almost simian, but with distinctly human eyes that held unmistakable intelligence. Not animal awareness, but consciousness, purpose. Walsh reached us, collapsing into Miles's arms, sobbing incoherently. Jordan and Lena raised their rifles higher. "Don't move!" Jordan shouted at the creature. "U.S. Forest Service!" The creature tilted its head, studying us with unnerving focus. Then it did something none of us were prepared for. It spoke. The sounds were guttural, resonant, nothing like human speech, yet they held clear patterns, inflections, the unmistakable cadence of language. It raised one massive hand, palm outward, in what could only be interpreted as a gesture of communication. "What the hell?" Lena whispered, her rifle wavering. The creature took a single step forward. Jordan fired a warning shot into the ground before it. "That's far enough," he shouted. For a moment, the creature stood motionless, its eyes, dark, intelligent eyes, fixed on me specifically, as if recognizing the ranger who had followed its tracks the previous day. Then it made a sound that approximated a human sigh, turned with surprising grace, and disappeared back into the forest with shocking speed for something so large. We stood frozen, rifles still raised, staring at the empty tree line. What was that?" Miles finally managed, still supporting the trembling Walsh. "Bigfoot," Walsh whispered, his voice raw from screaming. "It's real. It kept me in a cave, brought me food, watched me like it was studying me." Jordan lowered his rifle slowly. "Let's get him back to the station. He needs medical attention." As we helped Walsh toward the trail, I glanced back at the tree line. For an instant, I thought I saw movement. That massive shape watching our departure. But when I blinked, there was nothing there but swaying branches and lengthening shadows. We returned to the ranger station as dusk approached, half carrying Walsh for the final mile. His physical injuries were superficial, scratches, bruises, mild dehydration, but his psychological state was severely compromised. He alternated between hysterical babbling and catatonic silence, flinching at every sound from the surrounding forest. Inside the cabin, Lena administered first aid while Jordan radioed for emergency evacuation. Given the remote location, the earliest a helicopter could reach us would be midday tomorrow. "They're sending a psychiatric specialist with the medical team," Jordan informed us after ending transmission, "and a representative from Wildlife Services." "Wildlife?" Miles questioned, glancing toward Walsh, who sat wrapped in blankets, staring vacantly at the wood stove. "You reported this as a wildlife encounter?" Jordan's expression hardened. "What would you call it? We all saw something out there. But what we write in our official reports needs to reflect established science, not cryptozoology." "That thing spoke," I said quietly. "It wasn't just animal vocalizations. It was using language." "We don't know what we heard," Jordan countered. "Stress and expectation can alter perception. We went in looking for a missing hiker in circumstances that primed us for danger." Lena joined the conversation, keeping her voice low. "I've studied primate vocalizations for years. What we heard had linguistic structure, phonemes, syntax. No known animal produces those patterns." "So what are you suggesting?" Jordan demanded. "That we report encountering Sasquatch? That we claim a mythical creature kidnapped Walsh and held him captive? We'd lose our jobs, our credibility, everything." The argument might have escalated further if Walsh hadn't chosen that moment to speak, his voice hollow but suddenly coherent. "It wanted to understand us," he said, drawing our attention. "That's why it took me. It's been watching the trails, studying hikers, learning." I moved closer, kneeling beside his chair. Learning what, Robert? His eyes focused on mine, showing the first signs of true awareness since we'd found him. How to communicate. It knows we're different, but it recognizes kinship too. It's been trying to reach out for years, but everyone runs. Everyone's afraid. For good reason, Miles muttered. That thing could tear a man apart. Walsh shook his head vehemently. No. It could have killed me 100 times. It had opportunities, but it was careful, gentle even. It brought me berries, fish, made sure I had water. If it was so benevolent, why did you run screaming from it? Jordan challenged. Walsh's gaze dropped to his hands. Because it started imitating me, my words, my gestures. It was learning too fast. It felt invasive, wrong. And when it showed me the others, I couldn't stay. A chill ran through the cabin that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Others? Lena asked carefully. There's more than one, Walsh whispered. A whole group. Family. Tribe. I don't know the right word. But they're out there watching. Always watching. Jordan straightened, checking his sidearm with deliberate motions. We secure the perimeter. Regular patrols until extraction tomorrow. No one goes outside alone. We established a watch rotation. 2 rangers awake at all times, one monitoring the cabin interior and Walsh, the other patrolling the immediate surroundings. Jordan and Miles took first watch while Lena and I tried to rest. Sleep proved impossible. Every creak of the cabin's timbers, every rustle of wind through surrounding pines set my nerves on edge. Walsh's words echoed in my mind. They're out there, watching. I rose after an hour of restless tossing, joining Lena at the cabin's small kitchen table where she was reviewing her field notes by lantern light. Can't sleep either, she asked without looking up. Too much adrenaline, I replied, pouring a cup of lukewarm coffee from the pot on the wood stove. What are you working on? She hesitated, then turned her notebook toward me. The page contained detailed sketches of the creature we'd encountered, annotated with observations about its physical characteristics, movement patterns, and attempts at categorizing the sounds it had made. You're documenting it as a new species, I realized. Someone should, she said quietly. Whatever Jordan puts in the official report, we all know what we saw wasn't a known animal. If it exists, it should be studied, understood, protected even. Protected after what it did to Walsh? We don't know exactly what happened to him yet, she countered. He said it didn't harm him, that it provided food and water. That suggests intelligence, empathy. A sharp rap against the cabin's window interrupted her. We both froze, eyes darting to the glass pane where darkness pressed against the thin barrier. Miles? Lena called tentatively. The rangers on exterior patrol were under strict instructions to use the door, not signal at windows. No response came. The sound was not repeated. I moved to the window cautiously, peering out into the darkness. The exterior floodlight illuminated the immediate clearing around the cabin, but created deeper shadows beyond its reach. Nothing moved within the light's boundaries. As I turned away, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. A massive shadow detaching itself from the tree line, bipedal and deliberate in its movements. Jordan, I called sharply. We've got company. Jordan appeared from the back room where he'd been monitoring radio communications, rifle already in hand. Where? I pointed toward the north edge of the clearing. Just beyond the light, something big. Jordan moved to the window, squinting into the darkness. I don't see anything. It was there, I insisted, just for a moment. From outside came Miles's voice, tense but controlled. Movement in the trees, northeast perimeter, something large. Jordan grabbed the cabin's powerful spotlight, throwing open the door to sweep its beam across the indicated area. The light caught nothing but swaying branches and dancing shadows. Miles, fall back to the cabin, Jordan ordered through his handheld radio. Maintain visual contact with the building at all times. We watched through windows and the partially open door as Miles emerged from the shadows at the cabin's eastern corner, walking backward with his rifle raised. He reached the door without incident, slipping inside with visible relief. Saw something moving parallel to my patrol route, he reported, breathing heavily. Massive, moving through undergrowth like it wasn't there. When I turned my light toward it, it vanished. Not running away, just gone, like it was never there. They can move silently when they want to, Walsh said from his position near the stove. None of us had noticed him rise. They've adapted to these forests over thousands of years, learned to become practically invisible when necessary. Jordan secured the door, double-checking the locks. Everyone stays inside now. We maintain watch from windows only. Extraction is less than 12 hours away. A heavy silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the crackling of the wood stove and the occasional creak of timber. We positioned ourselves at different windows, Jordan facing north, Miles east, Lena south, and myself covering the western approach. For nearly an hour, nothing moved beyond the pool of light surrounding the cabin. Then, from my vantage point, I noticed something unusual about the tree line approximately 50 yards away. A section of darkness that seemed denser than its surroundings, with an almost vertical edge that suggested something standing rather than natural forest shadow. 3 o'clock, I murmured to the others, using military positioning. Just inside the tree line, something's watching us. The others adjusted their positions to follow my sight line. As if sensing our collective attention, the shadow retreated deeper into the forest. I saw it, Lena confirmed. Bipedal, at least 7 feet tall. Jordan reached for the radio. I'm calling in reinforcements. This has gone beyond a standard search and rescue. Before he could transmit, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard rose from the surrounding forest. Not a single voice, but many, calling and responding in those same structured, language-like vocalizations we'd heard earlier. The chorus surrounded the cabin completely, suggesting multiple creatures positioned in a wide circle around our location. Walsh began trembling violently. They're talking about us, he whispered, deciding what to do. How could you possibly know that? Jordan demanded. Because I started to understand them, Walsh replied, his voice barely audible. After days of listening, not words exactly, but intentions, emotions. They're curious, concerned. Some are angry. The vocalizations continued, rising and falling in complex patterns. To my astonishment, I realized I could begin to distinguish individual voices, some deeper, some higher pitched, each with distinct cadences and rhythms. They're deliberating, Lena said, wonder overtaking fear in her expression. This is a social group using advanced communication to make collective decisions. About us, Miles added grimly, about what to do with us. A particularly powerful call sounded from directly north of the cabin, deeper, more resonant than the others, carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the rest. In the quiet that followed, heavy footsteps approached the edge of the light surrounding the cabin. From the darkness emerged the creature we'd encountered earlier, or one identical to it. It stopped at the boundary where light met shadow, its massive silhouette clearly visible against the night. Behind it, partially obscured by trees, other large shapes moved, at least 5 distinct figures, possibly more. My God, Lena breathed. A family group. The lead creature raised both arms slowly, palms forward in the same gesture of communication it had used in the meadow. Then, to our collective shock, it lowered itself to a sitting position just beyond the light's reach, a deliberate posture of non-aggression. Jordan's rifle remained trained on the creature, but confusion had replaced the determination in his eyes. What is it doing? Waiting, Walsh said. It wants to talk. Before any of us could respond, Walsh moved toward the door with sudden purpose. Robert, don't. Miles grabbed for him, but Walsh slipped past with surprising agility. They won't hurt me, he insisted, hand on the door latch. They could have killed me a dozen times over. They want understanding, not conflict. You're not going out there, Jordan said firmly, moving to block the door. That's not a request, it's an order. Walsh's expression hardened. Then you go out. Someone has to. This might be the most important moment in human history. First contact with another intelligent species that's been living alongside us, unacknowledged, for thousands of years. It's not human, Jordan countered. Neither are dolphins or chimpanzees, Lena interjected, but both show advanced intelligence, social structures, communication. What if these creatures represent something similar but more advanced, something that's evolved alongside humanity but remained hidden? The debate might have continued if the creature outside hadn't chosen that moment to do something truly unprecedented. It picked up a branch from the ground beside it, dragged one end through what appeared to be mud, then began making deliberate marks on a smooth section of exposed rock near the light's edge. We watched in stupefied silence as the creature created a series of symbols, curved lines, intersecting circles, patterns that seemed too deliberate to be random. When it finished, it set the branch down and looked directly at the cabin, waiting. No one spoke. The implications were too enormous, too world-altering to process in the moment. "I'm going out there," I heard myself say, surprised by my own resolve. "Mills, that's—" Jordan began. "My decision," I finished for him. "I'll keep my sidearm, I'll stay within the light, but someone needs to respond to whatever that is." I gestured toward the markings on the rock. After a tense silence, Jordan nodded once. 2 minutes. Any sign of aggression? You retreat immediately. I moved to the door, heart hammering against my ribs. As I stepped outside, the cold mountain air hit my lungs like a physical shock, helping clear the surreal haze that had settled over my thoughts. The creature remained seated, watching me with those disturbingly intelligent eyes. Up close, its size was even more impressive. Shoulders broader than any human's, muscle mass evident even beneath the thick hair covering its body. Yet its posture remained non-threatening, almost scholarly in its patience. I approached slowly, stopping several feet from the boundary where light met darkness. The creature made no move toward me, but its gaze never wavered. "Can you understand me?" I asked, feeling simultaneously foolish and awestruck. The creature tilted its head, listening. Then, in movements that appeared practiced but not natural to its physiology, it raised one hand to its chest, then extended it toward me, a universal gesture of greeting. I mirrored the movement instinctively. "My name is Casquet," I said, using my grandmother's name for me. "We are protectors of this land." The creature made a sound, not the complex vocalizations from before, but something simpler, possibly an attempt to approximate human speech. It gestured toward the markings it had made on the rock. "Headquarters called," he said when he noticed me stirring. "Walsh is being transferred to psychiatric evaluation. His account has been officially attributed to traumatic stress and exposure." "And the hair samples?" "Inconclusive, apparently. Lena's demanding additional testing, but they've relieved her of the samples and sent her back to regional headquarters for debriefing." The systematic dismantling of evidence had begun, exactly as Jordan had predicted. By the time the relief rangers arrived tomorrow, the official narrative would be firmly established. Experienced hiker lost in wilderness, suffers psychological break. Rangers find him in distressed state. Wildlife encountered during rescue consistent with known species, despite unusual behavior. "So that's it?" I asked, anger rising despite my attempt to maintain professional detachment. "We all saw them. We all heard them. That interaction happened." Jordan set the radio down carefully. "What would you have me do, Mills? Resign in protest? Go to the media with a Bigfoot story? We'd be laughed out of any credible forum, and the evidence we do have would be even more thoroughly buried." He was right, of course. The rational approach was to document everything privately, maintain our official report's accuracy without embellishing or editorializing, and wait for corroborating incidents to emerge over time. But something in me rebelled against this passive approach. The creatures, whatever they were, had initiated contact. They had attempted communication across an immense biological and cultural divide. That effort deserved recognition, respect, and reciprocation. "I'm going back to the stone structure," I announced, already gathering my gear. Jordan stared at me. "Headquarters ordered us to maintain position at the station." "We're also tasked with monitoring the area for unusual activity," I countered. "I can't do that from inside four walls." He recognized the determination in my voice and sighed. 4-hour maximum. Radio check every 30 minutes. First sign of anything unusual, you retreat immediately." I nodded agreement, though we both knew unusual had taken on an entirely new meaning in this wilderness. The forest welcomed me with morning sounds that now carried new significance. Every bird call could be a signal, every rustling branch potentially deliberate movement. I followed the main trail for several miles before branching toward the clearing where I'd found the stone structure. The journey felt different now. Less an intrusion into unknown territory, more a return to a place of significance. When I reached the clearing, the stone pyramid stood as before, but the twig effigy had been removed. In its place sat a small bundle of dark fibers bound with what appeared to be plant material. I approached cautiously, sensing I was being observed, though no sound or movement betrayed a presence in the surrounding trees. The bundle contained strands of the same dark hair Lena had collected as samples, along with something unexpected, a small, polished stone with naturally occurring bands of color that created a pattern resembling an eye. A gift? A marker? It was impossible to know the intention, but the deliberate placement suggested meaning. I removed my ranger hat and placed it beside the stone structure, my own offering in return. Then I stepped back, waiting. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then a familiar resonant vocalization came from the dense forest to my left, not threatening, but cautious, questioning. I came back, I said aloud, feeling simultaneously foolish and profoundly right. I want to understand. A massive shape detached itself from the shadows between trees, the same dominant creature from the previous night, or one identical to it. It remained partially concealed, watching me with those unsettlingly intelligent eyes. Slowly, deliberately, I removed my sidearm and placed it on the ground, then stepped away from it, a gesture of trust that violated every protocol in ranger training. The creature observed this action with evident understanding. It emerged further from concealment, then made a series of gestures, pointing to me, to itself, to the surrounding forest, and finally making a sweeping motion that encompassed everything. The meaning seemed clear: acknowledgement of shared space, shared responsibility. Yes, I agreed, nodding. This is both our place to protect. The creature made another sound, then pointed specifically to an area northeast of our position, toward the proposed logging concession. It made chopping motions again, followed by a gesture that mimicked trees falling. The logging, I said. You're concerned about the logging. It nodded, that disconcertingly human gesture again, and made another vocalization, this one carrying unmistakable distress despite the alien quality of its production. In that moment, looking into eyes that held genuine concern for the forest we both called home, I made a decision that would alter the course of my career, and perhaps much more. I'll try to stop it, I promised. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. The creature regarded me for several heartbeats, as if assessing my sincerity or perhaps my capability. Then it did something unexpected. It reached into what appeared to be a crude pouch fashioned from plant fibers and withdrew an object that gleamed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. It approached slowly, stopping several feet away, and placed the object on a fallen log between us. Then it retreated, maintaining that careful distance that acknowledged both connection and necessary separation. I moved forward cautiously and examined the offering. It was a human-made object, an old metal compass, weathered and damaged but recognizable. The manufacturer's mark dated it to the 1930s, and initials were crudely scratched into the back: A.H. Arnold Howard. My predecessor, who had vanished in these woods decades ago, whose fragmentary logs had first alerted me to something unusual in this wilderness. The implication sent a chill through me, despite the warm day. Howard hadn't transferred as station records indicated. He had encountered these creatures, perhaps established communication as I was doing now, and then, what? Disappeared into myth? Gone willingly into a world parallel to our own? Or had something darker occurred? A misunderstanding between species with no common language? The creature made another vocalization, then pointed to the compass and made a gesture I interpreted as offering, giving something back that had once belonged to my kind. Thank you, I said, picking up the compass carefully. This helps me understand. The creature nodded once more, then turned toward the forest. At the edge of the clearing, it paused and looked back, making a final gesture, pointing to me, to itself, and then making a motion like waves rippling outward. Communication, connection, continuation. Then it was gone, melting into the forest with that impossible silence that defied its massive size. I stood alone in the clearing, holding a compass that connected past to present, proof of contact that predated my own experience by decades. Howard hadn't been the first, I realized suddenly. How many others through history had encountered these beings? How many indigenous stories of forest spirits and wild men had roots in actual contact? The radio at my belt crackled, breaking my reverie. Mills, come in. You're overdue for check-in. I raised the radio. Copy, Jordan. Everything's fine. Just lost track of time. Find anything? I looked at the compass in my hand, tangible evidence of a truth the world wasn't ready to acknowledge. If I reported it, it would disappear into evidence bags and classified reports, joining Lena's hair samples in bureaucratic obscurity. Nothing conclusive, I replied. Heading back now. As I returned to the main trail, I felt the weight of knowledge few humans had ever carried. Certainty of another intelligent species sharing our world, watching our encroachment on their territories, attempting communication across an almost insurmountable divide of biology and culture. What responsibility came with such knowledge? What obligation to both human civilization and this ancient hidden society of beings we had relegated to myth and campfire stories? By the time I reached the ranger station, my decision was made. I would protect them as I protected the wilderness, not through official channels that would seek to study, classify, and inevitably exploit, but through quieter means, redirecting hiking trails away from their territories, advocating against the logging concessions without revealing my true reasons, becoming a boundary keeper between worlds that weren't ready for full recognition of each other. Jordan looked up from his paperwork as I entered. Headquarters called again. They've classified the incident as unusual wildlife behavior, species undetermined. The official recommendation is increased monitoring, but no public disclosure pending further evidence. In other words, business as usual, I said, unsurprised. This is how it works, Mills. The world isn't ready for what we saw. I nodded, feeling the compass in my pocket, my private reminder of a truth larger than official reports could contain. Maybe that's for the best. For now. That evening, as darkness reclaimed the forest, I stood on the cabin's porch, listening to the night sounds with new awareness. Somewhere in those woods, other minds contemplated the same stars, considered the same boundaries between our worlds, perhaps even reflected on our brief moment of connection. The wilderness had never felt less empty, nor more mysterious. Whatever my official duties as a ranger entailed, I had assumed a new role as well, guardian of a secret as ancient as the forests themselves, keeper of a truth that would, when finally acknowledged, forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the natural world. From the darkness came a distant vocalization, those complex, language-like sounds carrying across the night air. Not threatening, not even directed at me, but simply the sounds of another society, going about its business in parallel to our own. And for the first time since arriving at this remote outpost, I felt truly at home in the wilderness. I never thought I'd find myself deep in the wilderness of Wanisha National Forest. The name itself was fitting. Wanisha, from the Native American word meaning one who watches or guardian. Before taking this job, I had been comfortable with my life in the city, but something called me to the woods. Maybe it was the childhood memories of camping with my grandfather, or perhaps something deeper, ancestral, pulling me toward the ancient trees. The ranger station was a sturdy log cabin nestled between towering pines and a mirror-like lake that reflected the mountains. It had been built in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps and maintained its rustic charm despite modern amenities. My supervisor, Ranger Mike Blackwater, had been working these woods for 30 years. His weathered face told stories of countless rescues, encounters with wildlife, and mysteries of the forest that official reports never mentioned. "You chose a hell of a place to start your career," he said as we unloaded my meager belongings from my truck. "Wanisha Forest isn't like other parks. We've got over 400,000 acres of virtually untouched wilderness. Some parts haven't seen human footprints in decades." I nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "That's why I wanted to come here. I need something real." Mike gave me a curious look as if measuring my worth. "Well, you'll get plenty real out here. Just remember 3 things. Respect the forest, trust your instincts, and never, and I mean never, go out after dark without proper equipment and letting someone know where you're headed." I laughed at his seriousness. "What, are there wolves?" His expression didn't change. "Among other things." That first night I settled into my quarters at the back of the ranger station. The walls were thin, and I could hear the forest breathing outside my window. Wind whispered through pine needles, and occasional animal calls punctuated the darkness. I fell asleep to the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. I was jolted awake at 3:17 a.m. by a sound I couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't quite a scream, and it wasn't quite a howl. It hung somewhere in between, lingering in the air like morning mist. The sound made the tiny hairs on my arms stand at attention. I sat up, listening. Just when I convinced myself it was a dream, it came again, longer this time. Maybe 30 seconds of a continuous call that seemed to reverberate through the mountains. My door creaked open, and Mike's silhouette appeared. "You heard it too?" "What was that?" I asked, already reaching for my boots. "Officially? Coyotes, maybe a mountain lion," he said, his voice low. "But I've been hearing that sound for 30 years, and no coyote or mountain lion makes a call that lasts that long." "What do you think it is?" Mike was silent for a long moment. "The locals have their theories. The indigenous people who lived here called it Siatko, the wild man of the woods." I snorted. "Bigfoot? Seriously?" "I didn't say that," Mike replied. "But whatever it is, it's been making that sound since before my grandfather's time." He handed me a flashlight. "Come on. Protocol says we check for campers in distress when we hear unusual sounds." We stepped outside into the cool night air. The forest was alive with silence, that peculiar quiet that feels like a held breath. Our flashlights cut weak cones through the darkness, barely penetrating the dense undergrowth. "The sound came from the north side of the lake," Mike said, leading the way down a narrow trail. As we walked, I noticed something odd about the forest. Despite it being early summer, not a single insect chirped. No frogs called from the lakeside. The entire ecosystem seemed to be hiding. "Is it always this quiet after—" I hesitated to name the sound. "Yes," Mike answered simply. "Whatever it is, everything else knows to shut up when it calls." We circled halfway around the lake, checking the designated camping areas. All were empty, this being a weekday in the early season. Just as we were about to head back, my flashlight caught something on the ground. "Mike," I called, crouching down. "Take a look at this." In the soft soil near the water's edge was a footprint, or what seemed like one. It was nearly twice the size of my boot, with 5 distinct toe impressions. The depth suggested something heavy had made it. Mike knelt beside me, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Bear," he said after a moment. "Bears don't have 5 toes like that," I countered. "Young grizzly, unusual gait," he replied, standing. "We'll come back in the morning and make a plaster cast. For now, let's get back to the station." As we turned to leave, I heard a splash from the lake. Something large had disturbed the water, but in the darkness, I could see nothing. "Mike, don't look," he said sharply. "Just walk. Normal pace." I felt it then, the weight of eyes on my back. Something was watching us from the darkness beyond our flashlight beams. Something that wanted us to know it was there. The feeling followed us all the way back to the station. Only when we were inside with the door locked did Mike's shoulders relax. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's your first full day on the job. We'll need to file a report about that bear track." "But it wasn't." "It was a bear track," he interrupted firmly. "That's what goes in the report." As he turned to leave, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Have you ever seen it, the thing that makes that sound?" Mike paused at the door. "Once," he said quietly. 20 years ago, lost hikers near Black Rock Ridge. We found one of them. The other was never recovered." "What did you see?" His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw a genuine fear in them. "Something that doesn't exist," he whispered. "So I didn't see anything at all." He closed the door behind him, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of the forest pressing in from all sides. In the morning, we returned to the lakeshore. The footprint was gone, washed away by the gentle waves. Mike seemed relieved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being toyed with. Something wanted us to know it was there, but didn't want to leave evidence. That day marked the beginning of my education in Wanisha Forest. What I would learn over the coming weeks would challenge everything I thought I knew about the natural world, and about myself. The wilderness was watching, waiting, and it had been waiting for a very long time. 2 weeks into my posting at Wanisha, I was beginning to settle into the rhythm of ranger life. Days were filled with trail maintenance, checking on campers, and learning the vast network of paths that crisscrossed the forest. I hadn't heard the strange howl again, though sometimes at night I would wake with the certainty that something had called out in the darkness. It was a Thursday when the Australian backpackers arrived. 3 of them, Liam, Emma, and Darren, had been traveling across North America for 6 months. They were bronzed, cheerful, and carried the easy confidence of experienced outdoors people. "We've done the overland track in Tasmania and the Northern Territory," Liam explained as I checked their permits. "Heard this place has some of the most pristine wilderness in the States." "It does," I confirmed, marking their intended route on the map. "But it's also easy to get lost. The trails here can disappear under fallen leaves or after rain." Emma laughed. "We'll be fine. We've got GPS and emergency beacons." I nodded, but something made me uneasy. Technology isn't always reliable out here. There are dead zones where no signal gets through. "That's part of the appeal, mate," Darren said with a grin, "getting away from it all." They planned a 5-day trek that would take them deep into the forest, passing the lake and heading toward Black Rock Ridge, the same area Mike had mentioned in connection with the lost hikers. "I'd recommend staying on the eastern trails," I suggested. "The western route toward Black Rock can be treacherous." "We checked online, and all the reviews say the western trail has the best views," Emma countered. "We've come too far to miss out." I couldn't argue with their permits. They were in order, and the trails were technically open. With reluctance, I stamped their forms and gave them the standard safety briefing. As they were leaving, Mike returned from his patrol. He eyed the Australians with the same wariness I felt. "Where are they headed?" he asked once they were out of earshot. "Western Trail to Black Rock." He frowned. "Did you warn them?" "About the trail conditions, yes. About the other thing? No." Mike nodded slowly. "Good. No need to scare them with local legends." But I could tell he was troubled. That night, the Canadian researchers arrived. Dr. Jean LeBlanc and his assistant Kevin Mason were wildlife biologists studying predator-prey relationships in temperate forests. They set up their equipment in one of the research cabins near our station. "We're particularly interested in apex predator behavior," Dr. LeBlanc explained over coffee. "The way they mark territory, their hunting patterns, their impact on other species." "You mean bears, mountain lions?" I asked. "Among others," Kevin said, sharing a look with Dr. LeBlanc. "We've been following reports of unusual predator behavior across various wilderness areas." "What kind of unusual behavior?" Mike asked sharply. Dr. LeBlanc cleared his throat. "Large predators acting outside established scientific understanding, coordinated hunting tactics, deliberate territory marking aimed at humans rather than other animals." I felt a chill despite the warm evening. "You make it sound like they're intelligent." "All predators are intelligent," Kevin said. "But yes, we're tracking behavior that suggests higher cognition than previously documented." Mike's face had become a mask. "And what brought you to Wanisha specifically?" Dr. LeBlanc's eyes gleamed with excitement. "The frequency of missing persons cases relative to visitor numbers, the unusual sound patterns recorded by amateur researchers, and of course the footprints." "What footprints?" I asked, thinking of the one by the lake. Kevin pulled out a tablet and showed us photographs from other wilderness areas: Olympic National Forest, Gifford Pinchot, Mount Baker. Each showed massive humanoid footprints in various terrains. "These are all hoaxes," Mike said flatly. "Perhaps," Dr. LeBlanc conceded, "but the consistency across geographical areas, the anatomical accuracy, and the stride length analyses suggest otherwise." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. Kevin looked at me directly. "That an undocumented bipedal primate species exists in the Pacific Northwest forests, a species that has evolved remarkable adaptations for concealment and survival." "Bigfoot," I said, the word falling heavily between us. "We prefer undocumented hominid," Dr. LeBlanc corrected. "But yes, essentially what folklore has called Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or in these parts, Tsiatko." Mike stood abruptly. "You're welcome to conduct your research within permit guidelines, but I won't have you spreading these theories to visitors or locals. We have enough problems with amateur Bigfoot hunters trampling protected habitats." "Of course," Dr. LeBlanc agreed smoothly. "We're scientists, not sensationalists." After they left, Mike seemed agitated. "I don't like this. The Australians heading to Black Rock, these researchers poking around. It feels wrong." "You think they'll stir something up?" He looked at me with that same fear I'd glimpsed before. I think something's already stirring, and they're going to be right in its path. The next morning dawned misty and cool. I was scheduled for a perimeter check of the eastern trails while Mike handled administrative duties. Before I left, I stopped by the research cabin to check on the Canadians. Kevin was alone, setting up sound recording equipment. Dr. LeBlanc is already in the field, he explained. He likes to get an early start. I noticed a map on their table with several locations marked in red. One was at the far western edge of Black Rock Ridge, directly in the path the Australian hikers would take. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to the marking. Kevin hesitated. "Historical sighting locations. Areas with consistent reports over decades." "Reports of what?" "You know what?" he said quietly. "Your colleague Mike has seen one. It's in the records, 1994, search and rescue operation." I felt my mouth go dry. "He told you that?" "He didn't have to. We've been researching incidents for years. May 12th, 1994. 2 hikers lost near Black Rock. One found with exposure and trauma consistent with a fall. The other never recovered. The report mentions unexplained vocalizations and possible large predator activity. Mike Blackwater was the lead ranger on that rescue." I tried to maintain a professional demeanor. "Those reports are confidential." "They're public record if you know where to look," Kevin countered. Then his tone softened. "Look, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here because something is happening in these forests that science hasn't properly documented, and people are getting hurt because of it." As I left, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. The forest felt different today, the mist hanging between trees like cobwebs, the unusual silence despite it being morning when birds should be active. I decided to adjust my route to pass closer to the Western Trail. It wouldn't hurt to check on the Australians, make sure they were doing all right on their first night out. The eastern trails were clear and well maintained, but as I crossed over to the western section, the difference was immediate. These paths were less traveled, narrower, with vegetation encroaching from both sides. The forest here felt older somehow, the trees larger and more densely packed. About 3 hours into my hike, I found the Australians' campsite from the previous night. They had followed proper protocols, a designated camping area, properly stored food, a cleared fire pit. But something was off. Their fire had been extinguished correctly, but the ashes were scattered as if something had pawed through them after they left. I crouched to examine the ground and noticed partial prints in the soft earth, the same enormous 5-toed impressions I'd seen by the lake. They circled the entire campsite, coming to within feet of where the tents had been pitched. Something had stalked around their camp all night, watching them while they slept. I stood quickly, grabbing my radio. "Mike, come in." Static crackled before his voice came through. "Go ahead. I'm at the Australians' first campsite on the Western Trail. We've got visitors." It was our code for unusual activity. A long pause. "What kind?" "Same as the lake. Multiple prints, circling pattern. They came through here last night." "The Australians?" "Packed up and continued on trail this morning. Looks like they left around dawn." Another pause. "Stay put. I'm coming to you. We'll track from there." It took Mike nearly 2 hours to reach my position. By then, I'd found more prints leading away from the campsite, following the Australians' path toward Black Rock. "It's tracking them," I said as soon as Mike arrived. He examined the prints, his expression grim. "Maybe, or it's just moving through its territory." "In the exact same direction? Following their exact path?" Mike didn't answer, instead pulling out his satellite phone. "I'm calling for backup. We're going to intercept them and escort them back. You think they're in danger?" He looked at me, all pretense gone. "I think something's changed in the forest. The patterns are different. Usually it stays away from people, watches from a distance. This behavior, following so closely, investigating a campsite, it's unusual." "What about Dr. LeBlanc? He's out here somewhere too." Mike nodded. "We'll try to locate him as well." As he made the call, I stared into the dense forest. The trees seemed to watch us, the shadows between them deeper than they should be in midday. For the first time, I truly understood that we were not alone in these woods. And whatever shared them with us was growing bold. Backup wouldn't arrive until morning. We had a choice: wait, or follow the tracks. and try to reach the Australians before nightfall. Mike checked his watch. We've got about 5 hours of daylight left. If we push hard, we might catch them before they make camp. And if we don't? His eyes met mine, steady and serious. Then we make sure we're better prepared for the night than they are. We set off along the trail, following both the Australians' boot prints and the larger, more disturbing tracks that shadowed them. As we hiked, Mike finally began to open up about what he knew. 20 years ago, it wasn't just the hikers we were looking for, he said as we climbed a steep section. There had been reports from locals about increased activity, strange calls at night, livestock acting nervous, even some property damage at the outlying cabins. What kind of damage? Broken windows, doors torn off hinges, food stores raided. Most people blamed bears, but he trailed off. But what? Bears don't stack stolen items in piles. Bears don't arrange things. What we found was deliberate. A chill ran through me despite the exertion of hiking. You're saying they're intelligent. I'm saying whatever they are. They're not just animals acting on instinct. He paused at a ridge to catch his breath. That rescue mission in '94, we found the first hiker halfway down a ravine. Broken leg, hypothermia, but alive. He kept saying his friend had been taken, not that he'd fallen or gotten lost. Taken by what? Mike wiped sweat from his brow. He said they were surrounded in the night, that large figures moved just beyond their flashlight beams, that they heard mimicry of human voices calling for help from the darkness. His friend went to investigate and never returned. Did you believe him? Not at first. Thought it was the exposure, the trauma playing tricks on his mind. Mike's voice dropped. Then I saw one. I waited, heart pounding as he gathered himself to continue. It was during the second day of searching. I was alone checking a creek bed. Thought I saw movement under a fallen log about 50 yards away. I called out, thinking it might be the missing hiker. He swallowed hard. What stood up wasn't human. 8, maybe 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair. But it was the eyes I remember most. Intelligent, aware. It knew exactly what I was, and I knew it could have taken me if it wanted to. What did you do? Nothing. Couldn't move. It watched me for maybe 30 seconds, then it just melted back into the forest. Never found the second hiker. Called off the search after a week. I processed this as we continued hiking, the forest growing denser around us. If you saw one, if you know they're real, why keep it secret? Mike was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, because I'm not sure they're supposed to be studied or documented or proven. Some things in this world exist in the spaces between what we know. Maybe they're meant to stay there. As the light began to fade, we still hadn't caught up to the Australians. According to our map, they should be nearing the base of Black Rock Ridge, where they'd likely make camp for the night. We need to find a spot soon, Mike said, eyeing the darkening sky. We don't want to be moving after dusk. That's when we heard it. A scream in the distance. Not the strange howl from before, but a human cry of terror that echoed through the trees. We broke into a run. The scream came again as we crashed through the underbrush, abandoning the trail in favor of a direct route toward the sound. The forest had grown darker, shadows lengthening as the sun dipped below the ridge. My heart pounded against my ribs, each breath burning in my lungs as we ran. There! Mike pointed ahead where the trees thinned. We emerged into a small clearing to find Emma, one of the Australian hikers, standing rigid with fear. Her backpack lay at her feet, its contents scattered across the ground. Emma! I called as we approached. Are you all right? She turned to us, her face pale. Something was watching us, she said, her Australian accent thickened by fear. We were setting up camp when Liam noticed something in the trees. He went to check. Where are Liam and Darren now? Mike asked, scanning the perimeter of the clearing. Darren went after Liam when he didn't come back. That was 20 minutes ago. Her voice cracked. Then I heard the scream. Mike unholstered his sidearm, something I'd never seen him do before. Stay with her, he instructed me. Keep your radio on. You're not going alone, I protested. Someone needs to protect her, he said firmly. I've dealt with this before. Before I could argue further, a crashing sound came from the forest to our left. We all turned as Darren stumbled into the clearing, his face scratched and bleeding. It took him, he gasped, collapsing to his knees. It took Liam. Mike was at his side instantly. What took him? What did you see? Darren's eyes were wild. It was massive, like a man but not a man. Covered in dark hair. It moved so fast. Liam didn't have a chance. Which direction? Mike demanded. Darren pointed with a shaking hand toward a dense section of forest. There, toward the rock face, but it's getting dark. We can't go there now. Mike checked his watch. We have maybe 30 minutes of usable light left. Not enough time to mount a search. His face showed the weight of the decision. We need to secure this position for the night. We can't just leave Liam out there, Emma cried. We're not abandoning him, Mike assured her. But if we go blundering through the forest in the dark, we're putting everyone at risk. Our backup arrives at dawn. Until then, we hunker down, stay alert, and prepare to search at first light. I helped gather Emma's scattered supplies while Mike and Darren collected firewood. We quickly established a defensive perimeter, building a fire larger than normally permitted under park regulations. Keep the fire high, Mike instructed. They don't like light or fire. They, Emma asked. How many are there? Mike and I exchanged glances. We don't know, I admitted. The forest hasn't been fully surveyed for this species. Species? Darren looked between us incredulously. Are you saying Bigfoot took our mate? We're not saying anything definitively, Mike replied carefully. But something is out there, and it's not a recognized species. As night fell completely, we huddled around the fire. Mike distributed emergency equipment, flares, backup flashlights, a bear horn. He kept his weapon close. If you hear something in the dark, don't investigate, he warned. Don't leave the light of the fire for any reason. They can mimic human voices, animal sounds. Don't trust anything you hear. How do you know all this? Emma asked, her eyes reflecting the flames. Mike's face was grim in the firelight. Experience. The night closed in around us, the forest becoming a wall of impenetrable black beyond our circle of light. For the first few hours, nothing happened. We took turns watching while others tried to rest, though I doubt anyone slept. Around midnight, the forest went silent. The normal sounds of nocturnal animals, owls, insects, the rustling of small mammals, ceased abruptly, as if a switch had been flipped. They're near, Mike whispered, standing to scan the darkness. I joined him, straining my eyes against the black void. At first, I saw nothing. Then, at the very edge of the firelight, I caught a glimpse of movement. Tall, bipedal shapes, moving with deliberate silence between the trees. There's more than one, I breathed. I count 3, Mike confirmed, his voice steady despite the tension I could feel radiating from him. They're testing our perimeter. Emma and Darren were awake now, both staring wide-eyed into the darkness. What do they want? Emma whispered. Territory, maybe, Mike replied. Or they're curious, or hunting. We don't know enough about their behavior to be sure. A sound came from the forest then, a perfect imitation of Liam's voice calling out, Emma, Darren, help me, I'm hurt. Emma jerked forward instinctively, but Darren caught her arm. It's not him, he said hoarsely. Remember what they said. They mimic voices. The false calls continued, growing more desperate, more convincing. Then other voices joined in, some calling for help, others engaged in mundane conversation as if a group of hikers was just beyond our sight. The effect was profoundly unsettling. They're trying to draw us out, Mike said, feeding more wood to the fire. Stay focused. As the night wore on, the psychological warfare continued. The creatures circled our camp, sometimes drawing close enough that we could hear their breathing, heavy and deliberate. Occasionally, a massive shadow would cross just at the edge of visibility, there and gone before we could focus on it. Around 3 in the morning, something changed. The mimicry stopped. The movement around our camp ceased. An unnatural stillness descended. Something's wrong, Mike murmured, standing alert with his flashlight sweeping the perimeter. That's when we heard it. The same elongated howl I'd heard by the lake, but much closer. It started low, almost subsonic, then rose to a pitch that set my teeth on edge. The call lasted nearly 30 seconds, vibrating through the clearing. When it ended, Mike's radio crackled to life. Dr. LeBlanc's voice came through, breathless and excited. Do you hear that? Extraordinary. I'm recording everything. The vocalization patterns are consistent with territorial. The transmission cut off abruptly. Mike tried to respond. LeBlanc, what's your position? LeBlanc. Nothing but static answered. The researcher, Darren realized. He's out there too? Mike nodded grimly. Somewhere. Location unknown. Emma hugged herself tightly. What was that sound? What are they doing? Communicating, I said, the realization dawning. They're coordinating. As if to confirm my theory, another howl answered the first, this one from the opposite direction, then a third from somewhere near the ridge. They're surrounding us, Mike said quietly. But they're also surrounding something else. Liam? Emma asked hopefully. Or Dr. LeBlanc, I suggested. Or both. Mike made a decision. We need to move at first light. Get back to the main trail, head for the station. Our backup should be arriving from that direction. We'll meet them en route. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. The creatures didn't approach again, but we could feel their presence lingering in the darkness, watching, waiting. Dawn came with agonizing slowness. As the first gray light filtered through the trees, we quickly packed up camp. The forest remained unnaturally quiet. Stay close, Mike instructed as we prepared to move out. Single file. I'll lead. Then Emma, Darren, and you take the rear, he said to me. Keep your eyes on the forest, not the trail. We set off, moving as quickly as caution allowed. The path back to the main trail would take us along the base of Black Rock Ridge, a massive wall of stone that rose nearly vertical from the forest floor. The terrain was challenging, with fallen trees and rocky outcroppings forcing us to adjust our route frequently. About an hour into our hike, we found the first sign of Dr. LeBlanc, an abandoned recording device hanging from a tree branch. The case was cracked, but the memory card was intact. Should we take it? I asked Mike. He considered briefly, then nodded. Evidence might tell us what happened to him. As I reached for the device, I noticed something odd on the tree trunk, 3 long, deep gouges in the bark, about 8 feet off the ground. They weren't random. They formed a distinct pattern. Mike, I called softly. Look at this. He examined the marks, his expression darkening. Warning signs. They're marking territory. For us or for each other? Both, maybe. We continued, moving faster now. The forest remained eerily silent. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. It was as if all wildlife had evacuated the area. We were about 2 miles from the main trail when Darren spotted something ahead. There's a clearing just beyond those trees, he said, pointing. I see something on the ground. Mike signaled for us to stop, then moved forward cautiously to investigate. I stayed with Emma and Darren, scanning the forest around us. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After a moment, Mike beckoned us forward. It's safe. We entered a small meadow where wildflowers would normally be blooming. Instead, the ground was trampled, the vegetation flattened in a circular pattern. In the center lay a backpack, Liam's. Emma rushed forward, but Mike caught her arm. Wait, let me check first. He approached the pack carefully, examining the ground around it before touching anything. The backpack was intact, not torn or damaged. Mike opened it cautiously. Everything's here, he said, puzzled. Food, water, equipment, all untouched. Where's Liam then? Emma asked, her voice small. Mike shook his head. I don't know. That's when we heard it. A twig snapping in the forest behind us. We all turned, nothing visible, but the sense of being observed intensified. We need to move, Mike said urgently. Now! We hurried across the clearing, Darren carrying Liam's pack in addition to his own. As we reached the far side, a movement caught my eye, something large shifting position in the tree line we'd just left. I froze, staring hard at the spot. For a moment I saw nothing. Then, as if materializing from the forest itself, a figure emerged partially from behind a massive pine. It stood at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in dark, matted hair. But it was the face that paralyzed me, not quite human, not quite ape, with eyes that held an intelligence that seemed to pierce straight through me. It knew I saw it. It wanted me to see it. Mike, I whispered, unable to look away. He turned, following my gaze. His hand moved to his sidearm. Don't run, he said softly. Nobody run. The creature stepped fully into view now, its massive frame dwarfing the surrounding vegetation. It made no sound, simply watching us with those unnervingly aware eyes. Then it raised one enormous hand and pointed, not at us, but toward the ridge looming above the clearing. "It's trying to communicate," I breathed. Mike nodded almost imperceptibly. "But what is it saying?" The creature pointed again, more emphatically this time, then melted back into the forest with a silence that defied its size. "What just happened?" Darren asked, his voice shaking. Mike was staring at the ridge. "It was warning us." "Warning us about what?" Emma demanded. Before Mike could answer, a human figure appeared at the tree line where the creature had been. Dr. LeBlanc, disheveled, but apparently unharmed. "Thank God," he called, hurrying toward us. "I've been lost since yesterday." Mike held up a hand, stopping him. "Stay where you are, Doctor. How did you get here?" LeBlanc looked puzzled. "I was tracking sounds, got turned around. Been trying to find my way back." He took another step forward. "We should hurry. They're all around us." Something felt wrong. LeBlanc's movements were too stiff, his voice too flat. "Where's your equipment, Doctor?" I asked, noticing he carried nothing. A flicker of something crossed his face. Frustration? Anger? "Lost it. Now please, we must go. This way." He gestured toward the ridge. Mike drew his weapon. "That's the opposite direction from the trail." LeBlanc's expression changed completely, a darkness passing over his features. "The trail isn't safe anymore." His voice had changed too, deeper, with an odd cadence. "It's not him," Mike said quietly. "Back away, everyone." "What do you mean?" Emma whispered. "It's the researcher." "No," I said, the terrible realization dawning. "It's mimicking him, like it mimicked Liam's voice." At that moment, a terrible scream echoed from the direction of the ridge, a human scream of pure terror. All of us, including the false LeBlanc, turned toward the sound. In that instant of distraction, the figure that looked like LeBlanc charged. Mike fired a warning shot into the air. The creature froze, then let out a sound no human throat could produce, a roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath our feet. "Run!" Mike shouted. "Back to the trail, now!" We fled, crashing through the underbrush, all thoughts of stealth abandoned. Behind us, more roars joined the first, a chorus of rage that spurred us to greater speed. I glanced back once to see multiple large figures emerging from the tree line, giving chase. Their movement was shocking, not the lumbering gait I'd expected, but a fluid, powerful motion that ate up the distance between us with terrifying efficiency. "They're hurting us!" I shouted to Mike, "driving us toward the ridge!" Mike veered sharply, changing our course. "This way!" We turned away from the direction the creatures seemed to be pushing us, cutting across a dried stream bed. For a moment I thought we might escape. Then a massive figure dropped from a tree directly in our path. Mike skidded to a halt, raising his weapon. "Back up, slowly." The creature before us was larger than the others, its hair graying around what passed for a face. It made no move to attack, simply blocking our path. Behind us, the pursuing creatures had slowed, now moving deliberately to surround us. We were trapped. The gray-haired creature uttered a series of complex sounds, clicks, grunts, and low vocalizations that seemed almost like language. To my astonishment, Mike responded with similar sounds, halting and imperfect, but recognizable. The creature's head tilted, regarding Mike with what seemed like surprise. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Trying something," Mike murmured. "The old-timers who worked these woods before me. They said there was a way to communicate, patterns of sounds they'd learned from the indigenous people who lived here before the park was established." He made another series of vocalizations, gesturing toward the trail, then toward Emma and Darren. The creature watched, unmoving. Then slowly it raised its arm and pointed again toward the ridge. Mike frowned. "It keeps directing us that way." "But you said that's where they were hurting us," I said. "It doesn't make sense." A distant human cry reached us, weak but distinct. "Liam!" Emma gasped. The gray-haired creature grunted, again pointing insistently toward the ridge. Understanding dawned on Mike's face. "They're not hurting us. They're trying to show us something." "You can't be serious," Darren protested. "These things took Liam." "Maybe," Mike conceded. "Or maybe they found him." He made a decision. "We follow. But we stay together. Stay alert. To my shock, Mike slowly holstered his weapon and gave a slight nod to the creature. It returned the gesture, then turned and began moving toward the ridge at a pace we could follow. "Have you lost your mind?" I hissed as we fell in behind it. "Maybe," Mike admitted. "But I don't think we have a choice. They've got us surrounded, and they've had multiple chances to attack. They haven't." "Yet," I muttered. As we approached the base of the ridge, the terrain became increasingly rough. The creature ahead of us navigated it easily, occasionally pausing to ensure we were keeping up. The other creatures had fallen back, but I could sense them moving parallel to us through the forest, flanking our position. Whether as escorts or guards, I couldn't tell. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, we reached a section of the ridge where a recent rockslide had exposed a dark opening in the cliff face. A cave entrance partly concealed by fallen boulders. The creature stopped, pointing toward the opening. "In there?" Mike asked aloud. A low grunt was the only response. Mike turned to us. "Stay here. I'll check it out." "I'm coming with you," I insisted. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Emma, Darren, wait here. If we're not back in 5 minutes, use this." He handed Emma a flare gun from his pack. "Shoot it straight up. The backup team should be close enough to see it." With that, Mike and I approached the cave entrance, flashlights drawn. The creature made no move to follow us, simply watching from a distance. The cave opening was narrow but widened after a few feet. The air inside was cool and damp, with an earthy smell. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing a chamber about 30 feet deep. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just a typical limestone cave with stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Then my light caught something near the back wall, a huddled human form. "There," I pointed, moving forward quickly. It was Liam, unconscious but alive. Beside him lay another figure, Dr. LeBlanc, in similar condition. "They're both here," I called back to the entrance, where Emma and Darren waited anxiously. As Mike checked their vital signs, I examined the cave. Something wasn't right. The floor was too smooth in places, the walls showing signs of what looked like tool marks. "They're alive," Mike confirmed. "No obvious injuries beyond some scrapes and bruises. They seem to be drugged, or sedated somehow." I pointed my light at the back wall where my suspicions were confirmed. Crude symbols had been carved into the stone. Some looked ancient, others more recent. "Mike," I said quietly. "This place, it's been used before." He looked up, following my light to the markings. "Looks that way. But why? Why would they bring humans here, then show us where to find them?" Mike shook his head. "I don't know. But let's get these two out of here." We carefully lifted Liam and Dr. LeBlanc, carrying them to the cave entrance. Emma and Darren rushed forward to help. The gray-haired creature remained where we'd left it, observing from a distance. As we emerged with the unconscious men, it made a series of sharp vocalizations that echoed through the forest. Then, with one final look at us, a look that seemed to carry meaning I couldn't decipher, it turned and disappeared into the trees. Darren and Emma fussed over Liam while I examined Dr. LeBlanc more closely. His breathing was regular, pulse steady. There were no puncture wounds or signs of trauma, yet he remained deeply unconscious. "How do we get them back?" I asked Mike. "We can't carry them all the way to the station." He checked his watch. "Backup should have reached the main trail by now. If we can get there, we can meet them." A sound from behind made us all turn. There, emerging from the forest, was Kevin, Dr. LeBlanc's assistant, along with 2 park rangers I recognized from the next district. "Mike," one called, "thank God we found you." Mike sagged with relief. "Perfect timing. We have injured." As the rescue team approached, I noticed Kevin staring past us at the cave entrance, his expression a mixture of awe and vindication. "You found it," he whispered. "The interaction site." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. Kevin tore his eyes away from the cave. Dr. LeBlanc theorized that there were locations in these forests where the creatures would bring humans, places of study. The word sent a chill through me. Study? You mean they were experimenting on them? "Not exactly," Kevin said, kneeling to check on his colleague. "More like observation, learning about us as we try to learn about them." I remembered the strange symbols on the cave wall, the careful way Liam and Dr. LeBlanc had been positioned, not as prey, but as subjects of interest. "How did you find us?" Mike asked the other rangers. "We were following your planned route when we ran into Kevin here," one explained. "He said he had a good idea where you might have gone." Kevin nodded. "I've been tracking their movements for months. This area shows consistent patterns of activity." As we prepared to transport Liam and Dr. LeBlanc back to safety, I stared into the forest, feeling the weight of unseen eyes still watching us. We were being allowed to leave, I realized. The creatures could have prevented our rescue if they'd wanted to. The forest had secrets deeper than I'd imagined, and I was only beginning to understand the relationship between these mysterious beings and the humans who ventured into their domain. They weren't simply animals, nor were they the mindless monsters of campfire tales. They were something else entirely, intelligent, deliberate, and far more aware than we had given them credit for. As we made our way back toward the main trail, a single, prolonged howl echoed across the ridge behind us. Not a threat, but a farewell. The wilderness was watching, and it would be waiting when we returned. The journey back to the ranger station passed in a blur of exhaustion and tension. Liam and Dr. LeBlanc remained unconscious throughout the trek, carried on improvised stretchers by the rescue team. By late afternoon, we had reached the station where an emergency medical technician waited to assess their condition. "Physically, they appear unharmed," the EMT explained after examination. "Vital signs stable, no evidence of trauma. But this unconscious state, it's unusual. I recommend immediate evacuation to the hospital in Riverbrook." Mike nodded, already coordinating with park headquarters for a medical transport. Emma and Darren hovered anxiously over Liam, while Kevin maintained a similar vigil beside Dr. LeBlanc. I stepped outside, needing a moment alone to process everything that had happened. The lake shimmered in the afternoon sun, deceptively peaceful. How strange that just across this calm water, creatures that defied scientific classification were watching, thinking, planning. Mike joined me on the porch, his face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. "You holding up okay?" he asked. I laughed without humor. "Not really. Turned out to be quite the first month on the job." He nodded, understanding. "Most rangers go their whole careers without seeing what you've seen." "Do they?" I questioned. "Or do they see things they don't report? Things they convince themselves were bears or mountain lions or the play of light through trees?" Mike was quiet for a long moment. "Both, probably." "What happens now?" I asked. "Official report will say the hikers were caught in a minor rock slide at the base of Black Rock Ridge. Dr. LeBlanc was separated from his equipment during wildlife observation. All parties were rescued without incident." I stared at him incredulously. "That's it? No mention of what we actually saw? What actually happened?" "What exactly did happen?" Mike challenged. "We saw unidentified wildlife. We found 2 unconscious men in a cave. Anything beyond that is speculation." "Unidentified wildlife?" I repeated. "That creature stood 8 feet tall and communicated with us. It led us to the cave deliberately." Mike's voice lowered. "And if we put that in an official report, what do you think would happen? Best case scenario, we're assigned psychological evaluations and transferred. Worst case, the story gets out and every Bigfoot hunter and cryptid enthusiast in the country descends on Wanisha Forest." I couldn't argue with his logic, but the deception still felt wrong. "So we just pretend it never happened?" "No," Mike said firmly. "We remember, we learn, we adapt how we manage this forest and protect its visitors. But we don't expose what's out there to a world that would either destroy it or turn it into a circus." The medical transport arrived within the hour, loading Liam and Dr. LeBlanc for the journey to Riverbrook Hospital. Emma and Darren went with them, both still shaken but grateful their friend had been found alive. Kevin remained behind, insisting on retrieving Dr. LeBlanc's equipment from their research cabin. I accompanied him, partly out of duty and partly because I had questions only he might answer. "You weren't surprised by any of this," I observed as we gathered the scientific instruments. "You knew what was out there." Kevin paused in his packing. "We had theories, evidence, but knowing and seeing are different things." His eyes met mine. "You saw them clearly, didn't you?" I nodded. "The one that led us to the cave. I saw it face to face. It was..." Intelligent, Kevin finished. Aware. Present in a way most animals aren't. What are they? I asked directly. Kevin resumed packing, choosing his words carefully. Dr. LeBlanc believes they're an undocumented primate species that evolved alongside humans but took a different evolutionary path, one favoring concealment and avoidance rather than technological development. But that level of intelligence, they should have been discovered by now. Should they? Kevin challenged. Think about it, a species with human-level intelligence dedicated to remaining hidden. They'd understand our patterns, our psychology. They'd know exactly how to stay just beyond the edge of discovery. I considered this. But why reveal themselves to us yesterday? Why lead us to Liam and Dr. LeBlanc? Kevin zipped his bag thoughtfully. That's the question that will keep Dr. LeBlanc busy for years. Maybe it was compassion, maybe curiosity, or maybe they were sending a message. What kind of message? That they could have kept Liam and Dr. LeBlanc if they wanted to. That finding them was a privilege, not a right. Kevin shouldered his pack. Either way, Dr. LeBlanc will be thrilled when he wakes up. This is the closest anyone has ever come to documented contact. That evening, after Kevin departed for the hospital, Mike and I sat on the porch of the ranger station, watching darkness settle over the forest. Neither of us spoke for a long time, each lost in our own thoughts about what we'd experienced. Finally, Mike broke the silence. You know, before all this happened, I was considering retirement. 30 years in the service seemed like enough. And now? I asked. He gazed out at the darkening tree line. Now I think someone needs to stay who knows the truth. Someone who understands that this forest has guardians that don't appear on any wildlife management plan. I nodded, understanding. You think they'll become more active? Show themselves more often? No, Mike said after consideration. I think yesterday was unusual. Maybe our presence in their territory reached some tipping point. Maybe the researchers' equipment disturbed them. But generally, they prefer to remain hidden. Except for the sounds at night, I noted, the calls. Those serve a purpose, marking territory, communication. They don't mind us knowing they're there. They just don't want to be found, studied, categorized. I thought about the symbols carved in the cave, the deliberate way the creature had communicated with us. It's like they're just beyond our understanding, not quite animals, but not quite like us either. Mike nodded. The indigenous people who lived here before European settlement had stories about them. They called them the Old Ones, or the people of the forest. They didn't see them as animals to be hunted or feared, but as neighbors to be respected. Neighbors with very different boundaries, I observed. Exactly, Mike agreed, and understanding those boundaries is part of our job now. 2 days later, we received word from the hospital. Liam had regained consciousness with no memory of what had happened after he left camp to investigate a noise. Dr. LeBlanc remained unconscious, his condition unchanged. A week passed. The forest returned to its normal rhythm, or what passed for normal now that I knew what lurked among the ancient trees. I found myself listening differently to the sounds at night, watching the tree line with new awareness. During my patrols, I would sometimes find signs that I would have missed or misidentified before. Unusual breaks in branches too high for deer, strange arrangements of stones that seemed deliberate, footprints quickly obscured by forest debris. One morning, I woke to find a dead rabbit placed on the porch of the ranger station. It had been killed cleanly and left in plain sight, not the work of a predator consuming prey, but a deliberate placement. A gift, Mike suggested when I showed him. Or a message. What kind of message? He shrugged. Hard to say. Maybe gratitude for respecting their privacy. Maybe a reminder that they're still watching. I thought about the complex relationship that seemed to exist between these creatures and humans who entered their domain. Not simple predator and prey, but something more nuanced. A negotiation of space and boundaries that had likely been ongoing for centuries. 2 weeks after the incident, we received news that Dr. LeBlanc had finally awakened. According to Kevin, who called from the hospital, the researcher remembered everything up to the point of recording the vocalizations, then nothing until waking in the hospital. He's already planning his return, Kevin reported. Says this is the breakthrough he's been waiting for his entire career. Mike frowned at this news. Tell him the western sector of the park is closed indefinitely due to unstable conditions at Black Rock Ridge. Official order. He won't like that, Kevin warned. I don't care, Mike replied firmly. Some boundaries need to remain in place. After the call ended, I questioned Mike's decision. You're blocking legitimate research. Don't we need to understand them better? Mike's expression was resolute. Understanding doesn't always require invading. Those creatures have managed to coexist with us by maintaining their distance. Respect goes both ways. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I respected Mike's experience. So we just continue as before, pretending they don't exist in official reports while knowing they're out there? Not pretending they don't exist, Mike corrected. Protecting the fact that they do. There's a difference. As summer progressed, I settled into a new normal. During day patrols, I was a standard park ranger, helping hikers, maintaining trails, enforcing regulations. But at night, especially during my overnight shifts at the observation post near the lake, I was something else. A sentinel at the edge of two worlds, human and other. Sometimes, when the moon was high and the forest quiet, I would hear the calls echoing across the lake. Not threatening, but communicating something I couldn't quite understand. Occasionally, I would respond with my own call, an imperfect imitation that nonetheless felt right in the moment. Once, just once, something answered directly, a call that seemed to acknowledge my presence before fading into the night. One evening in late August, as summer began its transition to fall, I was completing paperwork at the ranger station when a knock came at the door. Opening it, I found Emma and Liam standing on the porch. We came to say thank you, Emma explained, and goodbye. We're heading back to Australia tomorrow. I invited them in, surprised by their visit. Liam looked fully recovered, though a certain wariness remained in his eyes. How are you feeling? I asked him. Physically fine, he answered carefully. Mentally, still processing. I nodded, understanding completely. The thing is, Liam continued, lowering his voice, I remember more than I told the doctors. Flashes, fragments. Being carried through the forest. A face that wasn't human. Emma took his hand supportively. We've agreed not to talk about it back home. Who would believe us anyway? But we wanted you to know that we know what really happened out there. And we wanted to ask, Liam added, if that's why you became a ranger here. Because you knew about them. I shook my head. No. I had no idea until recently. But now that I know, I paused, considering. Now I think maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. After they left, I stepped onto the porch and gazed across the lake toward the deep forest beyond. The sun was setting, casting long shadows from the ancient pines. Soon, darkness would fall, and the wilderness would reclaim its secrets. But not all of them. Some secrets were now shared between us. Between the creatures watching from the shadows and those of us who had glimpsed their reality. An unspoken pact had formed, a mutual understanding that transcended words. The forest had revealed itself to me, and in doing so, had changed me irrevocably. I was no longer simply a park ranger in Wanisha Forest. I had become something more, a keeper of boundaries between worlds, a guardian of mysteries that existed in the spaces between what we know and what we fear to discover. As darkness fell, a distant call echoed across the water. Long, complex, and hauntingly beautiful. An announcement of presence, a claiming of territory. And in my own way, without fully understanding why, I answered. The first snow of winter came early to Wanisha Forest, blanketing the pines in crystalline white and transforming the landscape into something from a fairy tale. The ranger station, with its wooden beams and stone fireplace, stood as an island of warmth in the frozen wilderness. 6 months had passed since my encounter with the creatures, whom Mike had taken to calling the Katuk, a name borrowed from local indigenous legends. In that time, I had learned to read the forest differently, to recognize the subtle signs of their presence. Branches broken in particular patterns, stones arranged in ways no natural process could explain, the occasional print quickly obscured by weather or deliberately wiped away. Dr. LeBlanc had made a full recovery but had not returned to Wanisha, his research permit mysteriously delayed by bureaucratic complications that Mike never quite explained. Kevin maintained contact, occasionally sending carefully worded emails asking about wildlife activity that we both understood was code for something else. The winter months had brought a new stillness to the forest. Visitor numbers dwindled to the occasional hardy backpacker or cross-country skier. The Katuk, too, seemed to retreat deeper into the wilderness, their calls less frequent as the cold set in. I had almost convinced myself that life had returned to normal when the Canadian researchers arrived. They came without warning, 3 men and 2 women from the University of British Columbia, led by a professor named Dr. Eleanor Morrison. Their paperwork was impeccable, their permits in order. They claimed to be studying winter adaptation in mammals, but their equipment, thermal cameras, sophisticated audio recording devices, DNA collection kits, suggested other interests. "I don't like it," Mike said as we watched them unload their gear into one of the research cabins. "Their paperwork is too perfect. Someone pulled strings to get them in here without the usual review." "Dr. LeBlanc?" I suggested. Mike shook his head. "He would have given us a heads up. This is someone else." Dr. Morrison approached as we stood observing, her breath clouding in the cold air. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Ranger Blackwater," she greeted Mike, then nodded to me. "And you must be the new ranger I've heard about. The one who had that interesting experience at Black Rock Ridge." My breath caught. The official report had mentioned nothing about what we'd really encountered. "Standard rescue operation," I replied carefully. "Nothing interesting about it." Dr. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Well, we look forward to a productive research season. The winter ecology of Wenetia is sadly understudied." As she walked away, Mike murmured, "They know. Someone told them." "Kevin, maybe?" I suggested. "Maybe. Or someone at the hospital. Or one of the Australians. Doesn't matter now. They're here and they're looking for the Katuk." That night, I volunteered for the overnight shift at the observation post. The small cabin, perched on a ridge overlooking the lake, offered a panoramic view of the forest below. With the full moon reflecting off the snow, visibility was exceptional. The landscape transformed into an otherworldly palette of silver and blue-black shadows. I kept the cabin dark, not wanting my presence to be too obvious. Through binoculars, I could see lights still burning in the researchers' cabin across the lake. They were working late, preparing for something. Around midnight, movement caught my eye. 3 figures emerging from the researchers' cabin, their headlamps creating bobbing points of light in the darkness. They headed toward the Western Trail, the same path that led eventually to Black Rock Ridge. I grabbed my radio. "Mike, you awake?" His voice came back immediately. "Yeah, what's up?" 3 of the researchers are heading out on the Western Trail. Night expedition." A pause. "That violates protocol. No night research without explicit approval. Want me to intercept?" Another pause. "No. Follow at a distance. See what they're up to. I'll join you from the south access point. Keep your radio on." I geared up quickly, thermal layers beneath my uniform, heavy boots, emergency pack. As an afterthought, I added the digital recorder Mike had given me months ago, after I'd expressed interest in documenting the Katuk calls. The night was bitterly cold, my breath freezing almost instantly as I stepped outside. The snow crunched beneath my boots, making stealth difficult. I stayed on the ridge trail, which ran parallel to but above the western path the researchers had taken. From this vantage, I could track their progress without being immediately visible. Their headlamps moved steadily through the trees, occasionally stopping as they examined something or consulted instruments. They were heading directly toward an area Mike and I had come to recognize as a boundary zone, a region where signs of the Katuk became more frequent and where we had silently agreed to limit our own patrols. I radioed my position to Mike, who confirmed he was approaching from the south. "Be careful," he added. "The temperature's dropping. Storm front moving in faster than predicted." He was right. The clear night was changing, clouds gathering to obscure the moon. The wind picked up, carrying the first flurries of what promised to be a significant snowfall. I quickened my pace, not wanting to lose sight of the researchers in the deteriorating conditions. They had reached a small clearing about 2 miles from the station, a place where, last fall, I had found an arrangement of stones that formed a pattern too deliberate to be natural. Through my binoculars, I could see them setting up equipment, a thermal camera on a tripod, audio recording devices positioned around the clearing's perimeter, and something that looked like bait stations. They're setting a trap, I realized aloud. As if in answer to my words, a sound rolled through the forest. That distinctive, elongated call that had haunted my dreams for months. It came from the north, beyond Black Rock Ridge, distant but clear. The researchers below froze, then burst into activity, adjusting their equipment and speaking excitedly to each other. One pointed in the general direction of the call, while another checked readings on what appeared to be a spectrographic analyzer. I reached for my radio to update Mike when a second call answered the first, this one much closer, perhaps less than a mile away. The researchers' excitement visibly intensified. Then a third call sounded, this one from behind me. I turned slowly, scanning the ridge. Nothing visible in the increasing snowfall, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. The Katuk were converging on the clearing, communicating, coordinating. My radio crackled. "I hear them." Mike's voice came through, hushed. "At least 3 distinct individuals. They're triangulating." "The researchers are setting up some kind of trap," I reported. "Bait stations, recording equipment. Should we intervene?" "Yes. This stops now. I'm 5 minutes out." I was about to move when a fourth call sounded, this one different from the others. Higher pitched, almost questioning. It came from very close to the researcher's position. Through my binoculars, I saw them react, pivoting toward the sound. One adjusted the thermal camera while another readied what looked like a tranquilizer gun. "They're armed," I radioed to Mike. "Looks like tranq gear." "Hold position," he ordered. "I'm coming up behind them." But it was too late for caution. As I watched, a massive figure emerged from the tree line opposite my position at the far side of the clearing. Even at this distance in the swirling snow, its dimensions were shocking, at least 8 feet tall, with a powerful build that moved with surprising grace. One of the researchers spotted it, pointing frantically. The one with the tranquilizer gun raised her weapon. "No!" I shouted, forgetting stealth entirely. My voice carried across the clearing. Both the researchers and the Katuk turned toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, a second Katuk emerged from the forest directly behind the researchers. This one I recognized. The gray-haired individual that had led us to the cave months ago. The researcher with the tranquilizer gun whirled, firing instinctively. A terrible roar split the night as the dart found its mark. The gray-haired Katuk staggered, then charged forward with shocking speed. The researchers scattered, abandoning their equipment in their panic. I slid down the ridge toward the clearing, shouting for them to run toward me. 2 of them changed direction, scrambling up the slope. The third, Dr. Morrison herself, stood her ground, calmly loading another dart. "Dr. Morrison," I called, "get out of there now." She ignored me, taking careful aim at the injured Katuk, which was now reeling, the tranquilizer beginning to take effect. What happened next occurred so quickly, I barely registered the sequence. The first Katuk, still at the far side of the clearing, let out a sound like nothing I'd ever heard. A command. A warning. From all around the perimeter, shadowy figures emerged from the forest, 7 of them, converging on the clearing. Dr. Morrison finally realized her danger and turned to flee, but it was too late. The gray-haired Katuk, fighting the effects of the tranquilizer, caught her in a single bound. There was no violence, merely containment, massive arms encircling her, lifting her off the ground as easily as one might lift a child. I reached the edge of the clearing just as Mike arrived from the opposite direction, his sidearm drawn. "Put her down!" he shouted at the creature. "Now!" The Katuk holding Dr. Morrison turned toward Mike's voice. Even in its drugged state, the intelligence in its eyes was unmistakable. It made no move to comply. The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt much longer. Then, from the ridge I had just descended, a figure stepped forward that made my heart stop. It was unlike the others, taller, more angular, its body covered not in the dark hair of its companions, but in what appeared to be a form of clothing made from bark, lichen, and animal hides. Its face, while still not human, had a different quality, older, more refined. It surveyed the scene, then made a series of complex vocalizations. Immediately the others responded, creating a chorus of calls that seemed to form a kind of conversation. The gray-haired Katuk reluctantly lowered Dr. Morrison to the ground, but kept a massive hand on her shoulder. She was remarkably composed, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her fear. The leader, for that was clearly what it was, approached Mike directly. It stopped a few feet away, studying him with ancient eyes. Mike slowly holstered his weapon. "Do you understand me?" he asked, his voice steady. The being tilted its head, considering. Then, in a voice that seemed to emerge from depths unimaginable, it spoke. "Yes." Dr. Morrison gasped. The sound of that single word, rough, halting, but unmistakably English, sent electricity through my veins. Mike maintained his composure. "What do you want?" The being gestured toward the abandoned research equipment. "No more hunting. No more study." "They were trying to catch one of you," Mike acknowledged. "That was wrong. It won't happen again." The being seemed to consider this, then gestured to Dr. Morrison. "This one knows. Dangerous." "She won't tell anyone about you," Mike promised. "I'll make sure of it." The being made a sound that might have been skepticism. "Others, like her, always come, always hunt." "I know," Mike admitted. "But we're not all like that. Some of us want to protect you, to keep your existence secret." The being studied Mike intently, then turned its gaze to me. I felt naked beneath that ancient stare, as if every thought, every intention was being weighed. "Why?" it finally asked. Mike glanced at me, then back to the being. "Because some mysteries should remain mysteries. Because your right to exist undisturbed matters more than our need to know everything." Snow fell between them, creating a veil that seemed to separate two worlds momentarily touching. The being reached out slowly and touched Mike's shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. Then it spoke again, its words carefully formed. "Long ago. Agreement. Your kind there." It gestured toward the lake, the ranger station beyond. "Our kind here," it indicated the deep forest, the ridge, the mountains. "Boundary. Remember." Mike nodded. "I remember. We'll honor the boundary." The being turned to Dr. Morrison, still held by the gray-haired Katuk. "You, forget this place." She shook her head, defiant even now. "I can't. This is the scientific discovery of the century. The world needs to know you exist." The being made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "World. Not ready. Never ready." It turned back to Mike. "She stays or goes?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear. They were offering us a choice: take Dr. Morrison with us or let her remain with them, forever. Mike's eyes met mine, a silent communication passing between us. Then he looked at Dr. Morrison. "Your choice, Doctor. Leave with us now and never return. Never speak of what you've seen. Or stay with them and satisfy your scientific curiosity at the cost of everything else." Dr. Morrison looked around at the gathering of Katuk, her expression a mixture of fear and fascination. "They're intelligent, tool-using, possibly language-capable. They're everything we've theorized and more." "Yes," Mike agreed, "and they're asking to be left alone. Your research ends tonight, one way or another." For a long moment, Dr. Morrison stood frozen in indecision. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. "I'll go. I'll say nothing." The leader observed this exchange, then made a series of vocalizations to the others. The gray-haired Katuk released Dr. Morrison, who stumbled away from it. "Equipment," the leader said, pointing to the abandoned research gear. "Take." Mike nodded. "We'll remove everything. No trace left behind." The being seemed satisfied. It turned to leave, then paused, looking back at us one final time. "Watch. Always watch." With that, it melted into the snowy forest, the others following like shadows returning to darkness. Within seconds they were gone, leaving only their massive footprints in the snow as evidence they had ever been there. Dr. Morrison stood trembling, the magnitude of what had just occurred finally hitting her. "They spoke," she whispered, "actually spoke human language." "And you're going to forget you ever heard it," Mike said firmly. "Pack up your equipment, all of it. You and your team are leaving at first light." She started to protest, but I cut her off. "It's not negotiable, Doctor. They gave you a choice, and you made it. Honor your word. The storm intensified as we gathered the researchers' equipment. By the time we returned to the station, nearly a foot of fresh snow had fallen, erasing all evidence of the night's events. Dr. Morrison and her team departed the next morning, their research officially terminated due to severe weather conditions and equipment failure. Mike made it clear that any attempt to publish or speak about what they had encountered would result in immediate legal action for permit violations and unauthorized research activities. Whether that threat would hold remained to be seen, but something in Dr. Morrison's eyes as she left suggested she understood the magnitude of what had transpired. Not just a scientific discovery, but a meeting between two intelligent species who had shared the same forests for millennia, one in the light, one in shadow. After they left, Mike and I stood on the porch of the ranger station, watching the snow continue to fall. "Will she keep quiet?" I asked. Mike shrugged. "For a while, maybe, but the lure of recognition, of being the one to prove they exist, it's powerful." "What happens when she talks?" He sighed. "Others will come. They always do. And we'll be here to maintain the boundary, to protect what needs protecting." "On both sides," I added. Mike nodded, understanding. "We're guardians of the threshold now, not just of the forest itself, but of the line between known and unknown, between discovery and mystery." That night, as I sat alone at the observation post, I heard it again. That distinctive elongated call echoing across the snow-covered landscape. But this time, it seemed different somehow. Not a territorial claim or a communication between the Katuk, but a message meant for human ears. I raised my digital recorder, capturing the complex vocalizations that carried through the winter air. When it ended, I played it back, listening carefully to the nuances, the patterns. Then, using the techniques Mike had taught me, I crafted my own response. Clumsy and imperfect, but recognizable. I stepped outside into the biting cold and sent my call across the frozen lake toward the deep forest beyond. For a long moment, nothing. Then, from the darkness, an answer came. Acknowledgement. Recognition. I smiled into the night. The boundary remained, the separation necessary, but understanding could bridge even the widest divides, creating connections that transcended species and time. The snow fell silently, covering the world in pristine white. Somewhere in the ancient forest, the Katuk continued their timeless existence, guardians of secrets older than human memory. And here, at the edge of their domain, I maintained my vigil. Keeper of boundaries, protector of mysteries, bridge between worlds, the wilderness was watching, and now I was watching back. I never thought I'd find myself tracking monsters through remote wilderness. Yet here I was, a park ranger at Whispering Pines National Forest, with a cabin by a lake and a job description that included everything from trail maintenance to search and rescue operations. My name is Natanoj, an ancient name meaning guardian of the forest, according to my grandmother, who claimed we had distant Native American ancestry. I had been working desk jobs in the city for years, feeling the weight of concrete and glass slowly crushing my spirit. When I saw the job posting for a park ranger position at Whispering Pines, something inside me awakened. A call back to nature I couldn't ignore. The interview was surprisingly straightforward. The head ranger, Liam, a weathered man with salt and pepper hair and deep crow's feet from years squinting into the wilderness, didn't seem particularly impressed with my resume. "Why do you want to be a ranger?" he asked bluntly, not looking up from my application. I told him the truth. "I need this more than you need me. The forest is calling me back." Something in my voice made him look up. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. 2 weeks later, I was moving into the small ranger cabin that would become my home. The cabin itself was nothing special. 1 bedroom, a modest kitchen, a living area with a stone fireplace, and a small bathroom. But its location was something out of a dream. Set back from Crystal Lake, with the imposing silhouette of Mount Blackwood rising behind it, the cabin offered views that million-dollar penthouses could never match. My duties were varied. During tourist season, I gave educational talks, directed visitors to trails appropriate for their experience levels, and occasionally rescued hikers who had ventured too far. In the quieter months, I maintained trails, monitored wildlife, and patrolled the more remote areas of the forest. It was during one of these patrols, 6 months into my new life, that I first heard whispers about the strange occurrences in the forest northern section. I was having drinks with Kelly, another ranger who managed the eastern zone, and Blake, who handled visitor services at the main entrance. We were at the Pine Cone, the only bar within 30 miles of the park. "You haven't been to Section 13 yet, have you?" Kelly asked, taking a long sip of her beer. "Not really. It's pretty far from my usual patrol route," I admitted. Blake and Kelly exchanged glances. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," Blake said, but his expression suggested otherwise. "It's just, there are stories about that area." "What kind of stories?" I pressed. "Missing hikers, strange noises at night, equipment malfunctions," Kelly said. "Most of it is just campfire tales, but..." "But what?" "There have been some documented cases of hikers going missing up there," Blake admitted. "More than in other areas of comparable size and difficulty." "And then there are the staircases," Kelly added quietly. "The what?" "Old staircases in the middle of the forest, leading nowhere. Some of the senior rangers say they're just remnants of old Forest Service structures, but they appear and disappear," Blake finished. "At least that's what they say." I laughed, but neither of them joined in. "You're serious?" "Look," Kelly leaned forward. "I've been a ranger here for 5 years. I've seen some things I can't explain. I'm not saying it's supernatural, but there's something not right about that section of forest." "And the Wendell brothers," Blake added. "Who?" "2 hikers who went missing last summer, brothers from Australia. Experienced outdoorsmen. They went into Section 13 and never came out. The search went on for weeks. We found one of their backpacks," Kelly said, "sitting at the top of a stone staircase in the middle of nowhere. No tracks around it, no sign of the brothers." I felt a chill run through me. But that could be explained. Maybe they dropped it and animals moved it. "To the top of a staircase?" Blake raised an eyebrow. "A staircase that wasn't there when the search party went through that area the day before?" I was about to respond when the bar door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. Liam walked in, nodding to a few regulars before spotting us. "Filling our new colleague with horror stories?" he asked, pulling up a chair. Kelly and Blake looked sheepish. "Just some local legends," Blake muttered. Liam's expression hardened slightly. "Those legends can cause real problems when they get out of hand. We've had thrill seekers putting themselves in danger trying to find these supposed phenomena." He turned to me. "Section 13 is remote and can be dangerous for unprepared hikers. That's why we have more incidents there. Nothing supernatural about it." The conversation shifted to more mundane matters after that, but I couldn't stop thinking about those staircases. That night, I dreamed of stone steps rising through misty forest, leading up into darkness. A week later, I found myself assigned to join a routine patrol of Section 13. Budget cuts meant we were shuffling responsibilities, and I would be accompanying Liam himself. The morning we set out was crisp and clear. Fall was setting in, painting the forest in fiery reds and golds. We took a ranger vehicle as far as the service road allowed, then continued on foot. "This area was logged heavily in the 1940s, Liam explained as we hiked. Then it was designated as wilderness. Not many trails, mostly game paths. The terrain grew steeper as we climbed, the forest denser. Old growth trees towered above us, their canopies filtering the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. There was a primeval feeling here, as if we had stepped back in time. "Watch your step," Liam warned as we crossed a small stream. "These rocks get slippery." As we continued, I noticed Liam checking his GPS more frequently. "Problem?" I asked. "Signal's spotty up here, always has been." He tapped the device. "Technology doesn't always play nice in Section 13. There was something in his tone that made me wonder if he believed the stories more than he let on. We reached a clearing around midday and stopped to eat lunch. As we sat on fallen logs, I decided to broach the subject. "So, about those staircases," Liam sighed. "I knew you'd bring that up. Are they real?" He was quiet for a long moment. "There are structures in these woods that don't appear on any Forest Service maps. Some look like staircases. Most are probably remnants of old fire lookouts or settler cabins. Most? I pressed. Liam met my gaze. I've been a ranger here for 25 years. I've seen things I can't explain. But spreading ghost stories doesn't help anyone. It just puts more people at risk when they come looking for thrills. Have you ever seen a staircase appear where there wasn't one before? He packed away his lunch without answering. We should keep moving. I want to check the North Ridge before heading back. We continued in silence. The forest seemed to grow darker the further we went, despite the clear sky above. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than my cabin. Moss hung from branches like green curtains, and ferns carpeted the ground. This is old growth, Liam said, his voice hushed. Never been logged. Some of these trees are over 800 years old. I felt small among these ancient giants, a mere visitor in their domain. My boots crunched on fallen needles, the sound seeming to echo despite the dense vegetation. Did you hear that? I stopped suddenly. What? I thought I heard footsteps, heavy ones. Liam listened intently. Probably a deer or a bear. Keep your bear spray handy. We moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sensation grew stronger as we approached the North Ridge, a prickling awareness crawling up my spine. And then I saw it. Through a gap in the trees, silhouetted against the sky, a tall humanoid figure standing atop the ridge. Too tall to be human, too upright to be a bear. Liam, I whispered, pointing. But when he looked, the figure was gone. Probably just a tree stump, he said. But his hand moved to the rifle on his shoulder, and his pace quickened as we continued toward the ridge. We reached the top as the sun was beginning its descent. The view was spectacular, miles of unbroken forest stretching to distant mountains. But my attention was drawn to something else. In a small clearing about 50 yards away stood a staircase made of stone, rising from the forest floor and leading to nowhere. Don't approach it, Liam said sharply when he saw the staircase. I froze, my foot half raised to take a step toward the structure. Why not? Liam's expression was grim. Just trust me on this. The staircase stood alone in the small clearing, as if waiting for someone to climb its steps. It was made of weathered gray stone, about 12 steps high, leading to an empty platform. No railings, no supports visible. Just stairs rising from the earth, ending in midair. How is that even standing? I asked, keeping my distance as instructed. It should collapse without support. That's one of the questions no one has a good answer for, Liam admitted. Engineering says they shouldn't be stable, but they are. You said they're remnants of old structures. That's the official explanation, he cut me off. And for some of them, it's probably true. But this one, he shook his head. This one what? Liam sighed heavily. This one wasn't here 3 days ago when I last patrolled this ridge. A chill ran through me despite the warm afternoon. That's impossible. I know what I saw and didn't see. His tone left no room for argument. We should head back. It'll be dark in a few hours. As we turned to leave, I couldn't resist taking one last look at the staircase. For a moment, I thought I saw a dark figure standing at the top, watching us. But when I blinked, there was nothing there. The journey back was tense and silent. Liam moved with purpose, checking his compass frequently. Once he stopped suddenly, holding up a hand for me to do the same. We stood perfectly still, listening to the forest. I heard nothing unusual, but Liam's expression was alert, wary. After what seemed like minutes, he relaxed slightly, and we continued. I wanted to ask what he'd heard, but something in his demeanor discouraged questions. When we finally reached the ranger vehicle, the sun was sinking behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape. Liam seemed to breathe easier once we were inside the car. We don't talk about what we saw today, he said as he started the engine. Not to visitors, not to other rangers who haven't been to Section 13. Understood? I nodded, though questions burned in my mind. That night I called my friend Mac in Toronto. We'd been close since college, and he'd visited me at the cabin a month after I started the job. As a wildlife photographer, he shared my love of the outdoors, but had a more skeptical mindset. A staircase in the middle of nowhere? He laughed after I told him what I'd seen. Sounds like someone's idea of an art installation. Liam said it wasn't there 3 days ago, I insisted. Memory is fallible, man. He probably just missed it before. Maybe. I wasn't convinced. But there's something strange about that section of forest, and Liam's reaction was intense. Old rangers love their mysteries, Max said dismissively. Keeps the job interesting. After we hung up, I sat on my porch watching the moonlight reflect off Crystal Lake. Something moved at the edge of the trees, probably a deer coming to drink. But I couldn't shake the image of that tall figure I'd glimpsed on the ridge. Too tall to be human, too upright to be a bear. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of stone steps rising endlessly into darkness and massive footprints in the forest floor. The next morning I found a note tacked to my door. The handwriting was spidery and unfamiliar. Many have seen what you saw. Few speak of it. The Ancient One walks in those woods. Stay away from the staircases. They are not meant for the living. I crumpled the note, telling myself it was just someone's idea of a joke. But a seed of unease had been planted, and it was beginning to grow. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my regular duties, deliberately avoiding any mention of Section 13 or the staircase. But I found myself drawing strange looks from some of the senior rangers. Had Liam told them what we'd seen, despite his insistence on secrecy? One evening, while filing reports in the main office, I overheard a conversation between two search and rescue volunteers. Another hiker missing near Blackwood Ridge, one said. Third one this month. Same area as the others? Asked the second. Yep, Section 13. Rangers are organizing a search for tomorrow. I felt a chill. Blackwood Ridge was where Liam and I had seen the staircase. The next morning, I volunteered for the search party. Liam gave me a warning look but didn't object. We set out at dawn, a group of 6 rangers and volunteers split into 3 teams. I was paired with Kelly, and we were assigned to the eastern approach to Blackwood Ridge. You've been there before, right? Kelly asked as we hiked. To Section 13? Once, with Liam. She nodded knowingly. Did you see anything unusual? I hesitated, remembering Liam's warning. Like what? You know what I mean, she said, her voice dropping. The stairs, or him. My heart skipped. Him. The woodsman, the walker, whatever you want to call it. Most people around here just call it Bigfoot, but that's not right. It's something else. I thought of the tall figure I'd glimpsed. I might have seen something, I admitted. But it was probably just a tree or shadow. Kelly gave me a hard look. We both know better than that. Before I could respond, our radios crackled to life. One of the other teams had found something, a backpack belonging to the missing hiker. We adjusted our course to rendezvous with them. The backpack had been found near a small stream, sitting neatly on a fallen log, as if placed there deliberately. The contents were undisturbed: water bottle, granola bars, map, first aid kit. No sign of struggle or wildlife interference. It's like they just set it down and walked away, observed one of the volunteers. Or were taken, I thought, but didn't say. We expanded our search outward from the backpack. Hours passed with no further sign of the missing hiker. The forest seemed to grow denser, the light dimmer despite the clear sky overhead. Sounds were muffled, as if the trees themselves were absorbing them. And then I saw it again, a staircase of gray stone half hidden among the trees. Not the same one I'd seen with Liam. This one was smaller, narrower, with moss growing between the stones. Kelly, I called softly. Over here. She approached cautiously, her expression changing when she spotted the stairs. Don't get too close, she warned. Why is everyone so afraid of them? I asked. They're just stairs. Are they? Kelly's eyes never left the structure. Look around you. These woods are ancient. They hold secrets we don't understand. That's not an answer, she sighed. The stories say they're doorways, thresholds between our world and somewhere else. The missing hikers? Some say they climbed the stairs when they shouldn't have. That's ridiculous, I scoffed, but even as I said it, I felt drawn to the staircase, a strange compulsion to climb those weathered steps. Kelly grabbed my arm. We need to keep searching. The others are waiting. As we turned to leave, a sound echoed through the trees. A long, low whistle that was neither bird nor human. It was answered by another from the opposite direction, Then another from behind us. "We need to go," Kelly said urgently. "Now." We hurried back toward the rest of the search party, the whistles following us through the trees. I glanced back once and saw something moving in the shadows, tall, dark, and fast. Much faster than a human could move through the dense underbrush. By the time we reached the others, the whistling had stopped. No one else had heard it, or at least no one admitted to hearing it. The search continued until dusk with no further signs of the missing hiker. That night, back in my cabin, I researched local folklore about the forest. Most sources mentioned Native American legends of a protective spirit that guarded the wilderness, but nothing about staircases or whistling shadows. As I was about to give up, an email arrived from Mac. The subject line read simply, "You need to see this." The email contained a link to an obscure forum dedicated to park ranger experiences. A post from 3 years ago, written by someone claiming to be a former ranger at Whispering Pines, detailed encounters with stone staircases and a tall, dark figure that seemed to guard them. The ranger wrote about whistling sounds used for communication and described finding hikers' belongings neatly placed near streams or on logs. Most disturbingly, they claimed to have once glimpsed a hiker climbing one of the staircases, a hiker who was never seen again. The post ended abruptly with no follow-up comments from the author. According to a forum administrator, the account was deleted shortly after posting. I was still pondering this when a knock came at my door. It was Liam, his face grave in the porch light. "We need to talk," he said. "There's something you should know about Section 13. Liam refused to come inside. Instead, he motioned for me to join him on the porch. The night was cool, moonlight silvering the lake's surface and casting deep shadows among the trees. "I should have told you this when you first arrived," he began, his voice low as if he feared being overheard. "But I was hoping you wouldn't need to know, that you'd stay away from Section 13. "What is it?" I prompted when he fell silent. Liam's weathered face looked haggard in the moonlight. "The forest there is different, older than the rest. The Native Americans who lived here called it the Forbidden Place. They would never enter it, even during the harshest winters when game was scarce elsewhere." "Because of the staircases?" "The stairs came later, after European settlers arrived. At least that's when they started appearing in records." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "The first documented sighting was in 1879 by a lumber surveyor. He described stone steps in the middle of virgin forest, at least a day's journey from the nearest settlement." "But what are they?" I pressed. "Who built them?" "No one knows for certain. Some theorize they're remnants of structures whose wooden components rotted away. Others believe they're some kind of ritual sites, but that doesn't explain how they appear and disappear." "Or why they're feared," I added. Liam nodded grimly. "There are stories, reports from reliable rangers and search personnel, of people climbing the stairs and vanishing, not just going missing in the conventional sense, vanishing while being watched." A chill ran through me. "That's impossible." "So are staircases that appear overnight," Liam countered. "Yet we both saw one." I thought of the forum post Mac had sent me. "And the figure in the woods? The one people call Bigfoot?" Something flickered in Liam's eyes, recognition and fear. "We've all seen it, some closer than others. It seems to guard the staircases, or at least the forest around them." "What is it?" "The locals call it Ancient Walker. The tribes that lived here had their own names for it." Liam looked out toward the dark tree line. "Whatever it is, it's been here longer than us, and it doesn't want us in its territory." "But this is a national forest," I argued. "People have a right to—" "Rights don't mean much to something that was here thousands of years before our laws," Liam cut me off. "The Forest Service knows about the phenomena in Section 13. They've sent researchers, experts. Some found nothing unusual, others never returned." My mouth went dry. "And that's why Section 13 isn't on the public maps." Liam nodded. "Officially, it's designated as a sensitive ecological area, restricted to authorized personnel. In reality, it's quarantined. But you still patrol it. Someone has to keep people out when possible, and to search for them when they go in anyway." His expression darkened. "The hiker we were looking for today, his GPS tracker's last signal came from right next to where that new staircase appeared." "Jesus," I whispered. You think he... I think he either climbed those stairs or the walker took him. Liam stood abruptly. The search resumes at dawn. I suggest you get some rest. Wait, I called as he started down the steps. Why are you telling me this now? He paused, his back to me. Because you're different. Most rangers who see what you saw either request transfers or convince themselves they imagined it. You're still asking questions. He glanced over his shoulder. And because I have a feeling you're going to need this knowledge very soon. With that cryptic statement, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving me with more questions than answers. Sleep was impossible after Liam's visit. I paced my small cabin, mind racing with implications. If even half of what he said was true, then the forest I'd come to love concealed something beyond conventional understanding. Around midnight, unable to settle, I decided to step outside for some air. The night was still, the only sound the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. I walked to the water's edge, watching the moonlight dance on the rippling surface. A movement caught my eye, something large crossing the lake in a canoe. The figure paddled with practiced ease, heading directly for my cabin's shoreline. As it drew closer, I recognized Alex, one of the older rangers who primarily worked the visitor center now. Evening, he called softly as he beached the canoe. Hope I didn't startle you. It's past midnight, I pointed out. What are you doing here? Alex straightened, moonlight revealing his lined face. Liam said he spoke to you about Section 13. I thought you might have questions he couldn't or wouldn't answer. I studied him suspiciously. Why would you know more than him? Because I've been up those stairs. Alex's voice was flat. 27 years ago, when I was green as spring leaves, I was part of a search team looking for a lost family, parents, and a young daughter. We found the stairs. I climbed them. My heart raced. What happened? Nothing, at first. At the top, I could see the forest from above the canopy, a view that shouldn't have been possible from the height of the stairs. As I stood there, the forest shifted. The light changed. I turned to come back down and the stairs were gone. That's impossible, I said automatically. Alex gave a bitter laugh. That's what I keep telling myself. I was standing on nothing, floating above the forest, and then I was falling. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged scar running from wrist to elbow. I woke up at the base of a cliff 2 miles from where the stairs had been. Broken arm, concussion, no memory of how I got there. You could have fallen from the cliff, I suggested. Maybe, except for one thing. His eyes met mine. The girl we were searching for? She was sitting next to me when I woke up, unharmed but changed. She never spoke again. Her parents were never found. A cold weight settled in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying whatever is in those woods, whatever the stairs connect to, it doesn't play by our rules. Time, space, physics, they're all negotiable there. Alex glanced nervously at the tree line. And the walker. It's the gatekeeper. Why are you telling me this? Because Liam thinks you might be like me. Someone who can see the truth without breaking. Most can't. He pushed the canoe back into the water. Tomorrow's search? Be careful. The stairs are appearing more frequently lately, and the walker is getting bolder. Before I could ask more, Alex was paddling away, his canoe merging with the shadows on the lake. Dawn came too quickly. I joined the search party with Alex's warnings echoing in my mind. We were split into pairs again, but this time I was with Liam. Our assigned area was the northern slope of Blackwood Ridge, close to where we'd seen the staircase. The forest felt different in the morning light, less threatening, more familiar. Birds called overhead, squirrels scampered along branches, and sunlight dappled the forest floor. It was hard to reconcile this peaceful scene with the eerie phenomena described by Liam and Alex. I hear you had a visitor last night, Liam said as we hiked. Alex had some interesting stories. Liam grunted. Did he tell you about the stairs? And the girl, is it true? His experience? Yes. His interpretation? Who knows? Liam stepped carefully over a fallen log. What matters is that something happened to him up there that science can't explain, and it's still happening to others. We hiked in silence for a while, climbing steadily. The terrain grew steeper, the forest denser with old growth. By midday, we'd reached a small plateau with a commanding view of the surrounding wilderness. "We'll take our lunch here," Liam decided, shrugging off his pack. As we ate, I scanned the forest below. From this vantage point, I could see patches of color where the fall foliage was particularly vibrant. One such patch formed an almost perfect circle, an anomaly in the organic patterns of nature. "What's that?" I pointed. Liam followed my gaze, his expression hardening. "We call those fairy circles, areas where the vegetation grows differently. They come and go like the stairs." "Are they related?" "Possibly. They often appear near where stairs have been spotted." He packed away his half-eaten lunch. "We should check it out." The descent to the circle took longer than expected. The terrain was treacherous, with loose rocks and hidden drops. By the time we reached it, clouds had gathered overhead, casting the forest into premature twilight. The circle was even more striking up close, a perfect ring about 30 feet in diameter, where the foliage was brilliant red and gold, while the surrounding trees were still predominantly green. At the center stood a stone staircase, taller than the one we'd seen before, spiraling upward around a central column. "This is different," I said, approaching cautiously. "Stop," Liam commanded. "Look at the ground." I glanced down and froze. Massive footprints, at least 18 inches long, formed a path around the perimeter of the circle. They were fresh, the soil still moist where it had been compressed. "The walker," I whispered. Liam nodded grimly, unslinging his rifle. "It's been here recently." As if summoned by our words, a low whistle echoed through the trees. Another answered from a different direction, then another. The same communication Kelly and I had heard during yesterday's search. "We need to leave," Liam said urgently. "Now." We backed away from the circle, Liam keeping his rifle ready. The whistling continued, seemingly coming from all directions now. As we retreated, I glanced back at the staircase. A figure stood at the top, human-sized, wearing what looked like hiking gear. "Liam," I gasped. "Someone's on the stairs." He turned, eyes widening. "Hey!" he shouted to the figure. "This area is restricted. Come down immediately." The figure didn't respond. As we watched, it turned and continued climbing, disappearing from view despite there being nowhere to go at the top of the stairs. "No!" Liam broke into a run, heading back toward the circle. I followed, heart pounding. We reached the edge of the circle just as a tremendous crashing sound came from the forest behind us. Trees swayed and snapped as something large moved through them at incredible speed. "The walker," Liam breathed, raising his rifle. What emerged from the tree line wasn't what I expected. Over 8 feet tall, it walked upright like a man but was covered in dark, matted fur. Its face was strangely flat, almost featureless except for deep-set eyes that reflected no light. Long arms ended in hands with fingers twice the length of a human's. It stopped at the edge of the circle opposite us, regarding us with those black eyes. The stench of wet earth and decay rolled off it in waves. Liam fired a warning shot into the air. "Back off!" he shouted. The creature didn't flinch. Instead, it emitted a whistle, higher pitched than before, almost musical. The sound made my head swim, vision blurring momentarily. When my sight cleared, I saw with horror that the staircase was changing. The spiral was unwinding, steps rearranging themselves into a straight ascent that now pointed directly at us. "Run!" Liam shoved me hard away from the circle. I stumbled, smaller versions of the walker, moving with inhuman speed. "We can't stop it," Liam shouted over the din. "We need to go." I turned to run, but my foot caught on a root. I fell hard, the impact knocking the wind from me. As I struggled to rise, I saw the walker reach the staircase. It paused, looking back at us. For a moment, its eyes met mine, and a strange sensation washed over me. Not fear, but recognition, as if it knew me. Then it began to climb. "Natanoj!" Liam was pulling at my arm. "Move!" I scrambled to my feet. As we fled, I glanced back one last time. The walker had reached the top of the stairs. Like the hiker before it, it simply continued upward, disappearing into thin air. The smaller creatures circled the staircase, whistling in what sounded almost like celebration. We ran until our lungs burned, not stopping until we reached a stream far from the circle. Liam collapsed on the bank, gasping for breath. What was that? I managed between gulps of air. Liam shook his head. I don't know, not exactly, but I think we just witnessed a crossing. A crossing? Between worlds. He sat up, face grim. And I think it took that hiker with it. 3 days passed before I could bring myself to file a report about what happened in the fairy circle. When I finally did, I stuck to the facts. Missing hiker, strange footprints, no recovery of the body. I made no mention of the walker or the disappearing staircase. Neither did Liam in his report. The official conclusion: the missing hiker likely succumbed to exposure in a remote area. The search was called off after a week. Life at the ranger station attempted to return to normal, but I could feel the tension among those who knew what had really happened. I threw myself into routine tasks, trying to forget what I'd seen. But at night in my cabin, I found myself researching similar phenomena. Reports of staircases in wilderness areas weren't as uncommon as I'd thought. They appeared in folklore across cultures, often described as thresholds or gateways. And the walker, accounts of similar creatures emerged from nearly every wilderness area in North America. Most were dismissed as Bigfoot sightings, but the details varied significantly from the popular conception. These beings were described as guardians or gatekeepers, not simply wild creatures avoiding human contact. 2 weeks after the incident, my friend Mac arrived for a planned visit. He'd been eager to photograph the fall colors, unaware of what had transpired in the forest. I debated whether to tell him what I'd seen, but decided against it. What could I say that wouldn't sound delusional? The evening of his arrival, we sat on my porch drinking beers and catching up. The conversation eventually turned to my work. So, found any more mysterious staircases? Mac asked with a grin. I forced a laugh. Not recently. I still think it's some artist's installation, or maybe old foundations from logging days. Maybe, I conceded, not wanting to argue. Mac studied my face. You're different, you know, since you started this job. How so? More serious. Like you've seen something that changed you. He took a pull from his beer. The forest gets to people that way sometimes. Before I could respond, a knock came at the door. It was Kelly, her expression tense. Sorry to interrupt, she said, glancing at Mac. Liam needs you at the station, now. What's happened? I asked, already reaching for my jacket. Another hiker missing, in section 13. I felt a chill. I'll be right there. I'll come with you, Mac offered, standing. Kelly hesitated, looking to me for direction. It's fine, I assured her. He's just visiting. The drive to the station was tense and quiet. When we arrived, Liam was in the briefing room with several other rangers and search personnel. He raised an eyebrow at Mac's presence but didn't comment. The missing person is Emma Lynn, 24, experienced hiker, Liam began, pinning a photo to the board. She was supposed to check in with her boyfriend via satellite phone 6 hours ago. When she didn't, he alerted authorities. Her last known position was here. He pointed to a map of Section 13. My stomach dropped. It was near the ferry circle where we'd seen the walker. We'll deploy at first light, Liam continued. Standard search and rescue protocols. Teams of 2, grid pattern. As the briefing concluded, Liam pulled me aside. Your friend should stay here, he said quietly. He's a good hiker, I argued, and an extra pair of eyes. This isn't about his capabilities, it's about what we might find out there. He already knows about the staircases, I pointed out, and he doesn't believe they're anything supernatural. Liam sighed. Fine, he's your responsibility, but keep him away from any structures you find. I nodded, though I doubted we'd encounter anything like what we'd seen before. Lightning rarely struck twice in the same place. The search began at dawn, with Mac and me assigned to the western approach to the ferry circle. The morning was misty, reducing visibility to a few dozen yards in places. The forest felt unusually quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. So, what exactly are we looking for besides the hiker? Mac asked as we hiked. What do you mean? I mean Kelly's face when she came to get you. And Liam's warning about structures. There's something you're not telling me. I considered lying, then decided against it. Mac deserved the truth, especially if we were heading into potential danger. Remember those staircases I mentioned? They're real, and they're not natural. Mac laughed, then stopped when he saw my expression. You're serious. Dead serious. And there's something in these woods that guards them. Something that took the last hiker who went missing. I told him everything. The walker, the disappearing staircase, the fairy circle. To his credit, Mac listened without interrupting, his skepticism gradually giving way to concern. That's hard to believe, he said finally. I know. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't seen it myself. We continued in silence for a while, the mist thickening around us. Visibility dropped to just a few feet in places, forcing us to stay close together. Shouldn't we be calling out for her? Mac asked. The missing hiker? I nodded, though something in me recoiled at the thought of making noise in this unnatural stillness. Emma, I called. Emma Lynn, Park Rangers. No response. We continued calling periodically as we hiked, our voices seeming to fall flat in the dense mist. After about 2 hours, we reached a small clearing. The mist was thinner here, allowing glimpses of the sky. In the center of the clearing stood a familiar sight, a stone staircase, though not the spiral form we'd seen before. This one was straight, leading up about 15 steps to a small platform. Is that? Mac's voice trailed off. Yes, I confirmed grimly. Don't approach it. Mac stared at the structure. It's just sitting there, no supports. How is that possible? That's the question, isn't it? We circled the staircase at a safe distance, looking for any sign of Emma or the walker. The ground around the structure was oddly bare. No plants grew within about 10 feet of it. Look, Mac pointed to the ground near the first step. Footprints. Small human footprints led directly to the staircase. There were no prints leading away. She was here, I said, feeling sick. She climbed the stairs. Maybe she just continued past them, Mac suggested. Then where are her outgoing prints? Before he could respond, a whistle sounded from the forest, the same eerie call I'd heard before. Another answered from behind us, then another to our right. What is that? Mac whispered. Trouble. We need to move. I keyed my radio. Liam, it's Natanoj. We found a staircase in a clearing about 2 miles west of the fairy circle, footprints leading to it, and we're hearing the whistling. Static answered me. I tried again with the same result. Radios don't work near the stairs, I realized aloud. We need to get back to where we can call for help. We turned to leave, but the mist had thickened again, obscuring the way we'd come. The whistling grew closer, more insistent. Which way? Mac asked, fear evident in his voice. I consulted my compass, but the needle spun wildly, useless. I'm not sure. A crashing sound came from the tree line, branches breaking under heavy weight. We froze, watching as a dark shape emerged from the mist. The walker. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching us with those black, expressionless eyes. Behind it, smaller figures moved in the mist, the same creatures we'd seen before. What the hell is that? Mac's voice was barely a whisper. Don't move, I warned. Don't run. The walker took a step forward, then another. It stopped about halfway between the tree line and the staircase, regarding us with what seemed like curiosity. Then, to my shock, it raised a long-fingered hand and pointed, not at us, but at the top of the staircase. I followed its gesture. A figure stood there, a young woman in hiking gear, Emma Lynn. Emma? I called. Are you okay? She didn't respond. Her expression was blank, her eyes fixed on some point beyond the clearing. We need to get her down, Mac said, taking a step toward the stairs. I grabbed his arm. Wait, something's not right. As we watched, Emma turned and continued climbing, though there were no more steps, just air. Like the hiker before, she simply disappeared. The walker lowered its arm and emitted another whistle. Lower pitch this time, almost mournful. The creatures in the mist answered, their calls forming an eerie harmony. They're singing, Mac realized. Some kind of ritual? The walker's gaze shifted to us. It took another step forward, long arms hanging at its sides. I tensed, ready to run despite knowing it was futile. But instead of approaching, the walker raised its hand again, this time extending it toward me, palm up. A gesture of offering. "It wants me to go with it," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "That's insane," Mac hissed. "We need to get out of here." The walker whistled again, a different pattern, almost like speech. To my astonishment, I felt I understood it. Not words exactly, but meaning. It was asking for help. "I think it needs us," I said slowly. "Or me, specifically." "You can't be serious," Mac protested. "That thing probably took Emma and the others." "No," I shook my head. "I don't think it took them. I think it was trying to stop them from climbing the stairs, like it tried to warn us before." The walker whistled again, more urgently. It gestured toward the tree line, then back to the staircase. Warning and invitation combined. Making a decision I knew might be my last, I took a step toward it. "I'll go with you. But my friend stays safe." The walker seemed to consider this, then nodded. A disturbingly human gesture from such an alien being. It turned and moved back toward the forest, looking over its shoulder to ensure I was following. "Are you crazy?" Mac grabbed my arm. "You can't go with that thing." "I have to," I said, surprised by my own certainty. "I think it's been trying to communicate all along. The missing hikers, the staircases. There's something bigger happening here that we don't understand." "Then I'm coming too," Mac insisted. "No. If I don't come back, someone needs to tell Liam what happened." I pressed my GPS tracker into his hand. "Get back to the ranger station. Tell them everything." Before he could protest further, I turned and followed the walker into the mist. The walker moved swiftly through the forest, its long strides forcing me to jog to keep up. The mist seemed to part before it, closing again behind us like a curtain. I had no idea how far we'd traveled or in what direction. The world had narrowed to just this strange journey through the trees. Smaller creatures occasionally appeared at the edges of my vision, keeping pace with us, but never approaching. Their whistles created a constant background chorus, like a language I almost understood. After what felt like hours, but might have been minutes, we reached another clearing. This one was larger, with ancient standing stones forming a rough circle. At the center, a massive staircase rose in a spiral, far taller than any I'd seen before. It seemed to be made of the same stone as the monoliths, weathered by untold centuries. The walker stopped at the edge of the circle, gesturing for me to do the same. It whistled, a complex series of notes that was answered by something from above. I looked up and felt my heart stutter. At the top of the spiral staircase, barely visible against the swirling mist, stood a figure. It resembled the walker in its proportions, but was older, grayer, with a mane of white fur flowing from its head. It raised a hand in greeting, or perhaps command. The walker beside me dropped to one knee, bowing its head. It whistled again, a deferential sound. The elder creature responded with a series of whistles and grunts. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the vast clearing. The walker rose and pointed to the staircase, then to me. It wanted me to climb. Why me? It couldn't answer in words, but it reached out and tapped my chest, just over my heart. Then it tapped its own chest in the same spot. "We're the same somehow," I guessed. "Connected?" It nodded, then pointed again to the staircase. The implication was clear. I needed to ascend. "Will I be able to return?" I asked, though I knew it couldn't give me assurances. The walker's expression was unreadable, but it placed a large hand on my shoulder. A gesture that felt oddly comforting despite the alien nature of the creature. Then it stepped back, giving me space to decide. I stared at the staircase, remembering Alex's story, how he had climbed and found himself falling through empty air, and yet he had survived. Changed, perhaps, but alive. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the stone circle. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. The smaller creatures watched from the tree line, their whistling falling silent. I approached the staircase, each step feeling like a decision I could still reverse. But something pulled me forward. Curiosity, destiny, or perhaps just the strange connection I seemed to share with these beings. The first step felt solid beneath my foot. So did the second. I continued climbing, the spiral taking me higher, my perspective of the clearing changing with each turn. The mist swirled thicker as I ascended, until I could no longer see the ground below. About halfway up, I paused to catch my breath. Looking up, I could see the elder walker still waiting at the top. It gestured for me to continue. The final steps were the hardest, not physically but mentally. I knew I was crossing a threshold that few humans had ever approached. When I reached the platform at the top, I found myself standing eye to eye with the elder walker. Up close, its features were more defined, deep-set eyes that held an intelligence far beyond what I'd expected, a face lined with what could only be described as wisdom. It regarded me for a long moment, then extended a hand. In it lay a small stone, polished to a high shine and carved with symbols I didn't recognize. When I took it, the stone felt warm, almost alive in my palm. The elder walker whistled, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to resonate within me. And suddenly, without words being spoken, I understood. The staircases weren't built by the walkers. They were natural phenomena, weak points between worlds that manifested as physical structures. The walkers were guardians, ensuring that what belonged in each world stayed there. But recently, the boundaries had been weakening, staircases appearing more frequently, allowing things to cross that shouldn't. And I, through some quirk of heritage or fate, could help strengthen those boundaries. The stone in my hand was a key of sorts, a tool that would allow me to seal the thresholds when necessary. The revelation washed over me like a wave, leaving me breathless. I looked at the elder walker and nodded, accepting the responsibility being offered. It whistled again, and the world around us shifted. The mist parted, revealing not the forest below, but a landscape I'd never seen, vast plains stretching to distant mountains under a sky of deep purple. The elder walker's world. For a moment I was tempted to step forward, to explore this alien realm. But the weight of the stone in my hand reminded me of my purpose. I wasn't meant to cross over, but to help maintain the barrier between worlds. I looked back at the elder walker and nodded again, more firmly this time. I understand. I'll help. It touched my forehead with one long finger, and knowledge flooded my mind. How to use the stone. How to recognize when a threshold was forming. How to communicate with the walkers when necessary. Then the world shifted again, the mist swirling around us. When it cleared, I was standing at the base of the fairy circle where Liam and I had first encountered the walker. But the staircase was gone, the ground where it had stood unmarked except for a small circle of white stones. I walked back to the ranger station in a daze, the stone safely tucked in my pocket. It was nearly dusk when I arrived. Mac and Liam were there with a search party preparing to go looking for me. "Where the hell have you been?" Liam demanded. "Mac said you went off with that thing." "I did," I confirmed, "and I learned what's happening in Section 13. I told them everything, or at least everything I thought they could understand. About the staircases being natural phenomena, the walkers being guardians, and the missing hikers having crossed to another world, willingly or unwillingly." "So, Emma," Mac began. "Crossed over," I finished. "I don't know if she can return, but the walkers weren't taking people. They were trying to prevent unauthorized crossings." Liam looked skeptical but didn't argue. "And this stone?" he asked, looking at the artifact I'd shown them. "It helps seal the thresholds when they form. The walkers can't do it themselves. They need someone from our side." "And that someone is you?" Mac asked incredulously. I shrugged. "Apparently. I don't fully understand it myself, but I know what I need to do." In the weeks that followed, my job at Whispering Pines took on a new dimension. I still performed my regular ranger duties, but I also monitored Section 13 for signs of new thresholds. When they appeared, I used the stone to seal them, preventing further crossings. The walker, my walker, as I'd come to think of it, often appeared to guide me to new manifestations. We developed a silent communication, a partnership of sorts. The other rangers gave me space to do this work, not fully understanding but recognizing its importance. Mac returned to Toronto, carrying my story with him but promising to keep it between us. "The world isn't ready for interdimensional doorways and forest guardians," he said before leaving. "But if you ever need help, I'm a phone call away." One evening, a month after my journey up the spiral staircase, I sat on my cabin porch watching the sunset over Crystal Lake. The stone lay warm in my palm, its symbols catching the fading light. A movement at the forest edge caught my eye. The walker, watching from the tree line. It raised a hand in greeting, and I returned the gesture. Then it was gone, melting back into the trees it guarded. I looked down at the stone, feeling its weight, not just physically, but the responsibility it represented. I had come to Whispering Pines seeking escape from the mundane world, a return to something primal and real. What I'd found was beyond anything I could have imagined. A hidden world existing alongside our own, separated by the thinnest of veils. Ancient beings with their own purpose and culture, and my place among it all, not just a ranger of the national forest, but a guardian of the threshold between worlds. The sun dipped below the mountains, casting the lake into shadow. Night was falling, and somewhere in Section 13, new staircases might be forming. New crossings might be attempted. But now I would be there, stone in hand, ready to maintain the balance between worlds. I stood, gathering my pack for a night patrol. The forest awaited, with all its mysteries and dangers, and I, Natanoj, guardian of the forest, would answer its call. The cold bit at my face as I trudged through knee-deep snow toward the ranger station. Denali loomed in the distance, its peak shrouded in clouds that threatened more snow. 3 years into my position as a park ranger in the Alaskan wilderness, and I still hadn't grown accustomed to the brutal winters. But something about this vast emptiness had always called to me. My grandfather, who carried the name Takota, friend to all, had been a ranger here decades ago. His stories of the wilderness, the raw beauty, and the unexplainable things he'd witnessed had captured my imagination from childhood. When the position opened, I didn't hesitate. I abandoned my accounting job in Seattle, packed what little I owned, and drove north for 5 days straight. The cabin sat nestled between towering pines, smoke curling from the chimney into the gray sky. Inside, the radio crackled with static, someone trying to reach through. "Ranger Akuli, do you copy? We've got reports of hikers missing near Raven Mist Lake." I grabbed the receiver. "Copy. Details?" "Family of 3. Didn't return to their vehicle yesterday. Last known location was the Eastern Shore Trail. Temperatures dropping fast. On my way." Akule, meaning north wind in a language my grandmother once whispered to me, was what I chose when I came here. It felt right, connecting me to ancestors I barely knew but whose blood ran through my veins. I gathered emergency supplies, loaded my rifle, and headed out. The forest darkened earlier this time of year, shadows stretching between trees like grasping fingers. The path to Raven Mist Lake wound through dense forest. As I hiked, the familiar sensation of being watched intensified. Rangers develop a sixth sense about these things. Most chalk it up to heightened awareness of predators, bears, wolves, mountain lions. But deep in the wilderness of Alaska, locals whisper about something else. My first year here, an old Athabascan man visited the station. His weathered face had creased as he spoke of Tornet, the one who dwells in the mountains. Larger than a man, covered in dark fur, leaving prints no known animal could make. I'd nodded respectfully while thinking it just folklore, until I found those tracks myself. Massive impressions in mud, 5-toed, nearly 18 inches long. I'd photographed them, sent them to the Wildlife Research Center in Anchorage. They responded with scientific explanations, bear tracks distorted by melting snow, hoaxes, misidentifications. But I knew what I'd seen. The trees thinned as I approached Raven Mist Lake, now partially frozen. The fading light glinted off the ice, creating eerie patterns. I called out for the missing hikers, my voice echoing across the water. No response. I spotted their campsite on the far shore. Tent collapsed, supplies scattered. Not the organized departure of experienced hikers. Something had gone wrong. Tracks led from the campsite into the tree line, human footprints, running. I followed them, noting how they veered erratically between trees. These people had been fleeing something. The footprints ended at a clearing where the snow had been disturbed in a wide circle. In the center lay a single boot, child-sized. My stomach tightened. Something about the scene felt wrong. unnatural. The surrounding pines seemed to bend inward, watching. A cracking sound echoed from behind me. I spun, rifle raised. Nothing. The forest had gone silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant calls of wildlife. Just complete, suffocating silence. Then I saw it, a shadow moving between distant trees. Too large for a bear, walking upright. It paused, and though I couldn't make out features in the dimming light, I felt it looking directly at me. The radio at my hip burst to life with static, making me jump. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. "Ranger Akule, status update?" The voice crackled through. I swallowed hard. "Found abandoned campsite. Signs of distress. Continuing search. Be advised, storm front moving in. You've got about 2 hours before visibility drops to 0. I acknowledged and clicked off. The silence rushed back in, pressing against my eardrums. A sound carried on the wind, not quite a howl, not quite a scream. Something between, something that raised the hairs on my neck and sent cold rushing through my veins. As I stood there, paralyzed by that inhuman sound, I realized why I'd really come to Alaska. Not for my grandfather's legacy or the beauty of the wilderness, but because something in me had always known these woods held secrets. Things science couldn't explain. Things that existed in the spaces between what we know and what we fear. I'd come looking for answers. And now, as darkness fell and that sound echoed again, closer this time, I feared I might find them. The storm arrived faster than predicted. Within 30 minutes, snow fell in thick curtains, reducing visibility to mere feet. I had a choice: attempt to return to my cabin or seek shelter nearby. With the temperature plummeting and the missing family still unaccounted for, I opted for the emergency shelter a quarter-mile north. The small wooden structure, little more than a glorified shed, had saved lives during sudden weather changes. I pushed through the worsening conditions, my headlamp barely cutting through the whiteout. When I reached the shelter, I noticed the door hung open, swinging in the wind. Inside, supplies were strewn across the floor. Someone had been here recently. "Hello?" I called, sweeping my light across the single room. "Park ranger, anyone here?" A child's drawing caught my eye, pinned to the wall with a hunting knife. Crude crayon marks depicted 3 stick figures, presumably a family, standing beside a large, dark shape towering over them. The dark figure had been scribbled over repeatedly with black crayon, pressed so hard the paper had torn in places. I pocketed the drawing and secured the door against the howling wind. The temperature inside wasn't much better than outside, but at least the biting snow and wind were blocked. I fired up the small propane heater and reported my position over the radio. "Copy that, Akule. Search and rescue can't deploy until morning with this weather. Sit tight." I organized what remained of the shelter's supplies and settled in for a long night, rifle across my lap. Sleep would be impossible, not just because of the cold, but because of what I'd seen in the forest. Around midnight, the storm reached its peak. Wind screamed around the small structure, finding every crack and crevice. The shelter groaned against the assault. I dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every unusual sound. A heavy thud against the outer wall startled me fully awake. I grabbed my rifle, aiming at the door. The wind, fallen branch, 3 more thuds followed, deliberate, evenly spaced, not the random pattern of weather. "Who's there?" I called, voice steady despite my racing heart. Silence answered. Then scratching, long, slow drags against the wooden walls. It moved around the perimeter, testing, searching. The radio crackled, but only static came through. The storm must have knocked out communications. Something heavy pressed against the door, wood creaking under pressure. The small lock wouldn't hold against much force. I backed into the corner, rifle trained on the entrance. A low sound vibrated through the walls. Not quite a growl, deeper, like stones grinding together. The pressure on the door increased, the frame beginning to splinter. The single window, covered with heavy plastic for insulation, bulged inward as something massive pressed against it. Through the distorted material, I made out a dark shape, larger than any man. The plastic tore. Cold air rushed in along with reaching fingers. No, not fingers. Long, thick digits ending in black claws. The hand alone was the size of my torso. I fired. The report deafened in the small space. A roar of pain shook the shelter as the appendage withdrew. Heavy footsteps circled the structure faster now. The walls shuddered with impact after impact. The creature was trying to bring the shelter down around me. In the chaos, I noticed something I'd overlooked, a small trapdoor in the floor, likely accessing storage space. With the walls beginning to give way, I had no choice. I pried it open and dropped down into darkness, pulling the hatch closed above me. The space beneath was tight, smelling of earth and decay. My light revealed a crude tunnel extending away from the shelter. Someone had dug this recently. The walls were freshly disturbed, supported by branches ripped from trees. Above, the shelter collapsed with a thunderous crash. The creature's frustrated roars filtered down as it searched the ruins. I began crawling through the tunnel, away from the sounds of destruction. The passage extended nearly 50 yards, eventually opening into a natural cave formation, and there I found them, the missing family, huddled around a small fire, father, mother, young daughter. Their faces were haggard, eyes wide with fear. "Ranger," the man whispered. "Thank God." "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice low. The woman pulled her daughter closer. "We were camping. It started watching us the first night, just staying at the edge of the light. We thought it was a bear. The second night it took our food," the man continued. "Moved so fast. Bigger than anything I've seen. We tried to leave," the woman said, "but it herded us away from the trail, toward the lake. We found the shelter, but it followed. The tunnel was already here, like someone knew we'd need it. The tunnel's existence disturbed me almost as much as the creature. How long had this been happening? Were there others who knew about the thing in the woods, who had prepared escape routes?" The girl looked up at me, eyes hollow with what she'd witnessed. "It wants to keep us," she whispered, "like the others." "What others?" I asked. The father shook his head. "We found things in this cave, belongings, IDs, some dated years back." He pointed to the rear of the cave where a pile of backpacks, clothes, wallets lay. Evidence of other visitors who never made it out of the wilderness. A rumbling sound echoed through the tunnel. The creature had found our escape route. We had minutes at most. "There's another way out," the man said, pointing to a narrow crevice. "We've been afraid to try it, but..." A roar from the tunnel decided for us. We squeezed through the opening, emerging onto a snow-covered slope above the lake. The storm had weakened, dawn's faint light revealing our surroundings. I led them downhill, away from the cave. We'd made it nearly a quarter mile when a howl split the morning air. Looking back, I saw it emerge from the mountainside, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, moving with impossible speed through the deep snow. "Run!" I shouted, raising my rifle. The family fled toward the tree line as I took aim. The creature paused, regarding me from a distance of perhaps 100 yards. Even from there I could see its eyes. Too intelligent, too aware. This was no animal, but something else entirely. I fired twice. The shots echoed across the valley. The creature didn't fall, but it stopped advancing, watching as I backed away toward the trees. Search and rescue found us hours later, huddled in a ravine. The official report listed the incident as a bear encounter, the collapsed shelter as storm damage. The tunnel system was surveyed, catalogued, and deemed a natural formation enlarged by wildlife. The pile of belongings from missing persons was harder to explain away. Investigations were opened, then quietly closed. The family was debriefed extensively, their story evolving with each telling until even they seemed uncertain of what they'd experienced. But I know what I saw. I've remained in Alaska, continuing my work as a ranger. Some call it courage. The truth is more complicated. Whatever dwells in these woods has been here far longer than humans. It knows the wilderness in ways we never will. I stay because someone needs to watch it watching us. Someone needs to remember what hides in the spaces between civilization and wilderness, between light and shadow. And sometimes, in the deepest winter nights when the northern lights dance above and the forest falls silent, I hear that grinding sound, like ancient stones being moved after centuries of stillness. And I wonder if it remembers me too.